All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to start off this meeting, roll call of the joint meeting. I'm here, Council Member Thomas, who's chair of the Criminal Justice Committee, and will lead these proceedings after item number 3 is here. Council Member Moreno, Council Member Green are all here. Do we have enough to vote on item number 2? Yes. All right. So for item number 2, approval of the joint economic development and budget committee meeting minutes. So moved. Moved by Councilmember Green. I've seconded.
Second.
No, I assume no online comments or otherwise. Seeing none, that passes 4-0. And we'll start with item number 3, which is about ordinance calendar numbers 34302 and 34303. Good morning to Mr. White. And
Good morning.
to Jason as well.
Good morning. I think Jason has more seniority than I do.
But he's not the CFO.
Oh, I would say I disagree completely. So Good morning, Council. If I may, I appreciate the opportunity. I think years ago when the pandemic started, we were wrestling with what we consider a cash situation, because what we recognized, the revenue was actually depleting or would deplete, given the fact that most of the businesses and sales revenue and the like was decreasing. And so in 2022, in response to the pandemic, I guess there was a proclamation issued on the spread of COVID-19. And the proclamation limited business and operations significantly, reducing the revenue the city was receiving. I think at that time we were somewhere around $722 million. In September 2020, the city issued the revenue notes, and the whole point of that is to create a bridge from the point of having that revenue reduced, and then at some point the pandemic ending or receive additional aid to carry us through. So we did contact the state, got approval for $100 million, but we only pretty much entered into a $50 million agreement, in which we issued a note in which was secured by the special tax levy of 13.91 mils. And additionally secured by all the revenues and the available debt service payment. From there, we did a competition among many banks, and I really appreciate Deutsche Bank. I think they came to the table, if you will, with a reasonable agreement that did not take advantage of the city's situation in offering us a 2.25% interest. The semi-annual payment beginning May 1st, 2021 will mature in September 1, 2027. And then in that agreement, we both had what we consider a provision in there, one in which we can pay back the loan early and one in which they can receive the loan back early. The whole point was to have that money aside in the event that we need it. But as you know, we received to get additional money from the federal government. The city did not exercise the call option, meaning to return the money. That option was last year. Basically, this year, April 2023, the Deutsche Bank did exercise their option to call or pull the money back sooner. I believe with the budget chair, we had agreed to send that money back this year anyway. But to that point, they did exercise that option. So the total due is around $42.5 million. We have $8 million or so in debt service payment sitting there to make the payment this year. And also the interest accrued of $473,000, and the additional $34 million that we're asking for is coming out of fund balance, and we're asking for ordinance to prove that. As you know, the $50 million was set aside. I believe we used a little bit for the sewer and water board project, in addition to, so that money's sitting there with a little difference, but it was sitting in fund balance as a reserved item. So that's pretty much what we're asking this body to approve. The availability for us to go ahead and set this money aside and pay back Deutsche Bank, with a big thank you to them for standing in for the city in our time of needs. But that's pretty much it. I don't know if you want to add anything, Jason, but you're certainly welcome. No, I think it was a very good summary. If you recall, we were doing Zoom council meetings at that time when it was approved. That's how different everything was. It was a very competitive RFP process. Deutsche Bank provided a very good offer. We kind of always knew they were going to exercise their put option this year. And so that's why it's been
anticipated, so that money is available. I will note that the city of New Orleans was not in an unusual circumstance in 2020. These types of loans were done all over the country, all over Louisiana. State Bond Commission actually created a special program for approvals of these types of cash flow borrowings in Louisiana in 2020, and city took advantage of it. We were going through this process because it was prior to any congressional relief funds coming through. And so the need for that $50 million to ensure that the city continued providing necessary services to the citizens can't be overstated. It's very important. So I think from our perspective, with your budget approval, then it will be redeemed on September 1, and that will knock $43 million off the city's debt balance.
Councilmember Thomas has a question. My main one is, do we have to exercise the put option? And if we don't, what is the penalty?
Well, Deutsche Bank exercised the put option.
Right.
So it's what is done is done. They exercised it in April,
Right.
Gave you 6 months of notice that they were going to require it to be redeemed at that point. So your options were either to pay it off or to refinance it into a longer term obligation and continue paying debt service on the funds that you just had in reserve at that point.
So they gave the city notice in March that they were going to exercise the put
Correct.
option?
Yes.
Okay. And then am I correct in assuming that if the city decided to refinance, it would be at a less friendly rate than the 2.25%?
Absolutely, the market has changed, and I think what we have our eyes set on is clearly the next year's budget. And I think our expenses have grown, right? We have a lot of one-time revenue expenses that's actually are reoccurring. So by taking this debt service that we would have paid for continuing debt, we can now move that into the bucket of paying some of these additional costs for the upcoming budget, and that's the plan.
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas and Councilmember Murray.
No, those were the obvious questions for me, so there's no need for me to duplicate them.
Everybody, okay. Well, there you go. You got off light. So we'll look forward to getting that. And then I guess obviously, Mr. White, is it in our bucket now to get the audit done? Because I know that that's been an ongoing issue, and sort of the question of if we subtract 34 million from the fund balance, where does that leave us, will be something I think of interest to the entire council and public.
Through the chair, yes, we've submitted the budget, the audit to LLA. We're just waiting for their approval. So we're complete with it, just waiting for their approval. And then from there, we will take what we call the fund balance amount and go through the list of what we've already appropriated and deducted from it, including this amount. So we will at that point see what's remaining. I think that's what you're asking.
Yep, that's exactly. Okay. Thank you all very much. Thank you. All right, Councilmember Thomas, I turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Councilmember Giroux. So we're gonna start the criminal justice part of the joint committee meeting this morning. I think first we have up is criminal district court. If you guys could come to the table. Tell us who you are and start your report, please. Okay. Move to where?
They were.
Okay.
So it's been done already.
All right, thank
You want Tommy right there next to you?
Yes, I think this is it.
I was gonna say, Tommy's here. I'm supposed to.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm Chief Judge Robert Pittman here representing Criminal District Court. With me to my left is.
Good morning. Judge Tracy Fleming Savalier, Deputy Chief Judge of Criminal District Court.
Good morning, I'm Judge Juana Marie Lombard, Magistrate Judge, Criminal District Court.
And good morning, Shannon Sims, Deputy Judicial Administrator of Criminal District Court.
Good morning, Tommy Vassal, CFO for Criminal District Court.
And Rob Kasich, Judicial Administrator.
So this morning, we're just going to give you an update as to what's going on at Criminal District Court since we last
Yeah,
appeared.
and Judge, if you could include in your update, you know, what are our advances and what are our challenges?
Sure.
So that we'd like to update the public each meeting on where we are in terms of criminal justice and
Sure.
and where we need to go and those things we need to do.
Okay, so I'll start off
Please.
with our jury trials. As you know, that had been a major challenge, trying to get members of the community to show up for jury trials. And I can tell you that the court has held through July 31st, a total of 38 jury trials. We have seen a significant increase with members of the community showing up in compliance with their summons. Last time we were here, we talked about security. As you know, we had a challenge with there not being security over at the south white side of the building where the district attorney and his victims and witnesses and employees were wanting to enter the building.
Judge, not to interrupt you, but the councilman, we're looking for the written copy of you guys' report. Does our staff have it at all?
Oh, so we didn't submit a report or a PowerPoint. These are just our notes, if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, and so since then, we have monthly meetings with the CFO, John Williams, with the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office. And so we have worked through those challenges, and there is now a sheriff deputy who monitors the south white side of the building. We have an agreement where someone will be there from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. And then after that time, the district attorney's office will have a post-certified member there until proceedings, trials have concluded for the day. So as far as I know, that has been working perfectly. In addition to that, we wanted to tell you about something new that we have started. The court is in collaboration with the district attorney's office, and we implemented this past week the ability for ADAs to enter protective orders into the DocuSign system, which when ordered by the magistrate court, electronically disseminates to the appropriate agencies those protective orders. And so from April to July, there's been a total of 591 protective orders issued. And we're going to get back into that a little bit more. We have entered into sort of a collaboration with a Mentee court. Tulsa County is underway. Visitors from Tulsa County came to New Orleans on July 20th and 21st and met not only with the judges at Criminal District Court and some of our personnel, but with representatives from the New Orleans Family Justice Center, Hope Clinic, NOPD, SVS unit, OPDA, DV unit, and SLLS. And I think Councilwoman Moreno came to one of the seminars. So the court is continuing to collaborate with those outside agencies such as the City of New Orleans Department of Health, Blueprint for Safety, again, the New Orleans Family Justice Center, the sheriff, the clerk, and the district attorney's office in reference to trying to better serve individuals involving domestic violence. Additionally, since we've last appeared here, going back to the sheriff's office and security, first appearances have resumed as of August 1st in Judge Lombard's court, M1, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, so at this time, yes, we have resumed first appearances in M1. So that means that we now have 2 sets of first appearances daily. We've been working with the sheriff's office. They have been very cooperative in getting our inmates in early in the morning. And so we're excited. It cuts down on the time that people are incarcerated now by having that earlier appearance during the day.
And so if I could pick up where I left off, one of the other things is, as you are aware of the case management system, the clerk of court may talk about that, but we were advised that he received an extension until September 30th of 2024. That was granted by the Supreme Court for him to complete that case management project. And we are working with, collaborating with him on that. We are asking that we have some sort of uniform commitment order in that case management system, as well as protective orders. So those are some things that have either changed or have gotten better for the criminal justice system that we wanted to report to you since our last appearance before this committee.
Questions from council members? If not, I have a question. What level of collaboration and coordination do you guys have now? Are the members of the criminal justice system getting together prior to coming to our quarterly meetings? Are you guys having regularly meetings where you're looking at the different components and talking about the relationship to work on how you guys can work better?
Yes, I'd like to answer that. Yes, I know I only specifically mentioned meeting with the CFO with the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office, but we also have been meeting with the clerk of court. We've agreed to start monthly meetings with him as well. Additionally, the district attorney will have monthly meetings where one or two of the judges and the judicial administrator go over to his office. So it's not specifically to meet before we come to this meeting. It's just an overall agreement to meet so that we can all be on the same page as to how the criminal justice system can work better and we can be good partners to one another.
And what about the criminal justice coordinating committee of that commission? How often are you guys meeting with that agency?
Meaning the committee that's
Yeah,
headed
Ms.
by-
Stevens, Ms. Stevens. Yeah.
well, we haven't had a specific meeting with her commission, but there are other meetings that she has, such as the jail population meeting and what is the Sandy press
Press
off
off.
meeting,
That's
yeah,
the
all of
meeting
that.
with her
But
too.
we haven't had specific meetings with just her office.
We always have a representative or one of us will attend the criminal justice coordinating meeting, as well as all of the different subcommittee meetings, which includes jail population. Judge Lombard and Judge Camille Burris meet with those committees. And then in terms of domestic violence, I'm the one that represents the court with respect to the Domestic Violence Advisory Committee, along with Council Member Helena Moreno. And so we have a number of different subcommittees that are also meeting either on a monthly or quarterly basis.
And first of all, I think kudos to Councilmember Moreno, especially been leading this charge to deal with domestic violence. Her and Councilmember Harris for a long time. But there was a domestic violence trauma committee years ago that would meet with Gail Glapion, Julie Schwab Harris, Mayor Morial, myself, and members of the YWCA, especially given this spike and this increase in domestic violence. Have we thought about forming something like that? Because the domestic violence ordinance, the first one in the 90s, actually came out of the work that committee did. Do we have something formal like that now?
I think
Especially
we
given
already-
responding to
Yes.
the increase?
I think we already do have a number of different subsets. So we have the overall domestic violence advisory committee, but then out of that committee, we have a number of different subsets. So we have the fatality review committee, which has just completed a review of fatalities in 2020 arising from domestic violence situations. That subcommittee does meet. We have a special meeting today, actually at 2:30. Regarding strangulation. So that's a separate subcommittee that we have. We've had the accountability committee. That committee used to meet more regularly through the Family Justice Center, along with various third-party agencies that were providing services. And it's my understanding they're trying to revamp that committee. And so we have a number of different subcommittees that meet as a result of the domestic violence. We also have a special protective order committee that Ms. Sims and I meet on, in terms of we meet with the sheriff's office, the DA's office, and the clerk's office, as well as the city Department of Health, in order to ensure that protective orders, that we're keeping up with the current laws with respect to protective orders, that they're getting signed. And as you all know, in the legislature, there's been this new law that's going to take effect where protective orders have to be entered within 1 day of being issued. So we have a number of subcommittees.
Yeah, and I asked that question because that's a lot of different meetings that requires
Sure.
a lot of different time and a lot of different attention. Before they had one committee that public policy
Mhm.
came out of, the initial ordinances that dealt with domestic violence, the response from the police department, the fact that if there was a situation, you didn't ask one if the other was all right. Is there any thought to putting together a committee to holistically deal with what would be the outgrowth in terms of response from the
And-
police department and public policy?
I think that the domestic violence advisory group
Okay.
is the.
That'll deal with all of that.
Yes, that's
Okay.
the umbrella committee. And then out of that committee becomes several separate subcommittees that address specific issues.
All right. I usually don't like to ask my questions first, but when no one
Thank you.
responded, I kind of jumped on it. I apologize, colleagues. Councilmember Giarrusso.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. I just wanted to ask about the issues we've raised and y'all have raised in the past. First, y'all requested a transport van. Have y'all received that yet?
So, yes, we have. We've received both vans and a Durango. We are awaiting the delivery of an additional Durango.
All right, good. And then are there other outstanding operating requests that you've received that you have asked for, and where are they in process?
Yes, and so I'll let Mr. Kazik talk about that, or Mr. Vassal, actually.
Well, the one request that we were granted by the CAA's office was an additional $500,000 for increases for our employees. And so we've not yet received those fundings. I know sometimes the CAO waits until the fourth quarter for re-upping a lot of agencies. So we're still anticipating that. The other thing that was granted were the vehicles. And as has been indicated, we have received those thus far.
Is there still, Mr. Vassal, Mr. Kazik, money owing from jury pools or for any other issues? I just want to make sure we're sort of all up to date.
Yeah, I think all of the other asks that we had at the beginning of the budget period have been granted to us.
Okay. And then capital budget, have you had your presentation to city planning yet?
We have.
Okay.
Myself and Mr. Kazik appeared, and the court submitted 7 requests to the city. And one was for building security cameras, jury deliberation room, as Mr. Vassal just went over that with you, the Grand Hall HVAC system. And what else am I missing? Oh, jury parking lot security, fencing and a gate, courthouse security, perimeter fencing, Grand Hall restoration, and elevator updates. Those were the 7 that we submitted.
Okay.
And if you need us to go into further detail or to talk about amounts, we're prepared to do that as well.
I've seen the jury deliberations room. There's no doubt it needs upgrade. I guess to my colleagues, one of the things I think we need to think about is NOPD has had HVAC issues. NOFD's had HVAC issues. The libraries had HVAC issues. Criminal court is having HVAC issues.
We have 4 courtrooms out. One was just brought back up last Wednesday.
I think it's time for us to have a more holistic plan when it comes to air conditioning, particularly with this heat right now.
The systems are 40 years old.
Right. So, okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Kazik.
Commissioner, one more thing, if you don't mind.
Yes,
You had
absolutely.
mentioned about the jury renovations. I'm sorry, I thought you meant jury expenses. We're okay with the jury expenses, which is one of our line items,
Right.
but we still have that issue with the jury renovations that the city council had approved some funding for jury renovations, and it's a miscommunication or some kind of breakdown between the CAO's office and the council that no one knows about this money that was appropriated. So originally
Okay.
we heard from Vince Smith that there was a $1.2 million appropriation, but they can't even find that. So it's kind of at a standstill right now.
All right, I've made note of the 1.2 million and we will check into that.
And council, if I may, I would like to just remind you, we sent, after our last budget hearing, we sent a letter dated May 10th. That letter includes all of the 5 different requests in terms of the budget for the current budget. It also includes the issue with respect to the jury renovation and the money that was allocated, whether it was 5 million or 1.2 or a combination thereof. Also included is pretrial services request, building renovations, court employee salaries, and the garage gate software.
Councilmember Harris. Thank you, Council.
Hey, Councilmember Jeruso asked most of my questions about the physical plant and where you all stand. So what you're saying is there's $1.5 million lost somewhere in the shuffle that will allow you to go forward with the renovations to the physical plant.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's in my capital budget because I have, in my capital budget, it's all government buildings. So I'll take a look at it and get with Vince and get back to y'all on that. And I just want to commend you. I have a staffer who's currently in the jury pool. He's very nervous about it, but I think he's having a good time. I told him serving on a jury is one of the greatest things that I've ever done at criminal court. The only thing I've ever done at criminal court. So thank you. Thank you, judges.
For saying something complimentary.
And Councilman Juice.
Councilmember Marino. Do you have a response, another response to another council member?
I just wanted Shannon to follow up on the Adult Learning Center because I think there were some increases that we are incurring this year on that program.
So the Adult Learning Center took a 20% decrease in 2020. And their budget has not been reinstated. They asked us not to request it at this time, but to request it when we get ready to do the budget for this year. They have an increase in their rental space. We've tried to find another location for them, but there's nothing in the area that's suitable to handle where they are right now. So we're going to ask at that time that their budget be reinstated at least to what they had prior to the decrease.
Ms. Sims, do you have a back of the envelope number on that?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a back of the envelope number on that?
I think it was, they went from 577,053 to 461.
Okay, all right.
So it's not,
No, it's
Yeah.
not a ton of money. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to you all. I wanted to follow up on the domestic violence conversation from earlier. And while Judge Flemings Davalier brought up a lot of the different initiatives already underway and the effort led by the Health Department with that specific advisory committee. But I did want to mention that the Health Department is also really trying to do more public facing work. And one of the things, Chair Thomas, that the Health Department is working on is a big symposium actually led by the City Council to bring all stakeholders together to talk about what every kind of cog in the wheel of the criminal justice system, what are their plans to address this issue, and having us lead it as a public facing type of meeting, which I think is important. But then following up from that, almost a public facing task force after that, so that whatever everyone brings to the table as far as their plans, that we have a check-in as to like, okay, well, now what's happened? Now where are we in your specific plans? And so I think that would be really productive. And I know we have a lot of behind the scenes type of advisory committees, but I think it's also really important to put something in front of the people of the city too, so that they can see how we're all working together to try to prevent domestic violence in New Orleans. In that same vein, Judge Flemings Davalier also spoke about a training that recently occurred that you all led with the Health Department, and I appreciate that. And you brought folks down from Oklahoma, right?
Yeah.
From Oklahoma to talk about different things that are happening here and also in other parts of Louisiana where different jurisdictions are doing it right. One of the issues that we talked about are Gwen's Law hearings. And Gwen's Law hearings are like a contradictory hearing that occurs before bail is granted for a domestic violence offender. And I actually learned a lot in listening to Sonny Funk from Jefferson Parish, who is an ADA there, who talked about how they roughly have, 150 Gwen's Law hearings every month in Jefferson Parish. And here in New Orleans, we have maybe one or two. And so I wanted to understand kind of the difference there. And the other thing too that I learned during this training is that in Jefferson Parish, it's almost like an absolute that everyone's going to have a Gwen's Law hearing unless the judge, it's like kind of an in globo, everyone's getting a Gwen's Law hearing. It's only if the judge makes a specific kind of note to remove them from that Gwen's Law hearing list, that a Gwen's Law hearing doesn't occur. So for a Gwen's Law hearing to not occur is like the total least option, right? And so what can we do here in New Orleans to increase the number of Gwen's Law hearings? And what is the difference between what's happening in Jefferson and New Orleans? And any one of you all can take that one.
So since I do the majority of the Gwen's Law hearings, I'll take that.
Yeah.
So we do more than one or two a month. I think we had 5 this week. The difference is though that in Jefferson, it is literally an automatic. And they're for any domestic abuse. So remember, we've got two different things we're dealing with. One, trying to reduce the jail population and not hold misdemeanor nonviolent offenders in jail longer. And 2, trying to protect the victims. So actually, Andre Godin and I have been talking about trying to set some sort of parameter for what should be a Gwen's Law threshold. Because in New Orleans, if we just, I think we looked at the numbers, how many open pretrial cases you're talking about, holding hundreds of people in jail on every domestic abuse, every simple criminal damage to property, domestic, every DAB, which is still a misdemeanor. I think obviously when you get to felony DABs, DAB strangulation, DABs with gun charges involved, those things need to be a Gwen's Law hearing, but a Gwen's Law hearing is not by code just for a cooling off period. A Gwen's Law hearing is supposed to be synonymous to a dangerousness hearing, wherein you're talking about a Gwen's Law hearing. The purpose of a true Gwen's Law hearing is for the judge to decide if someone needs to be held without bond or at a very high bond with additional conditions like an ankle monitor and a key fob. So you don't want to do that when you read a gist that says there was some pushing and shoving and that they've been together for 10 years. And this is the first time you've had a domestic violence incident, because our DA's office also can't turn around fast enough. So for example, they set a Gwen's Law hearing last Wednesday. It came to my docket last Thursday. They weren't ready to hear it last Thursday. We had to roll it till yesterday. So that person is now being held in jail without bond, without the ability to make bond for 4 or 5 days. I try to do it 48 hours. Sometimes we can accomplish it in 48 hours, but normally they're asking for 72 hours or more. So you're talking about holding someone who's been married for 10 years that had a physical altercation, not downing that physical altercation, but now he's in jail. And so you're in jail for 4 days. They have people that lose their job for not showing up for 4 days over an arrest. So while I don't, Jefferson system works for them. I think they do it quicker. We have too much volume for the DA's office to be able to contact victims and put together a case to hold a Gwen's Law in 24 hours. So I think we have to come up with a plan, but I don't think any of you are saying, let's hold everybody arrested on a misdemeanor in jail for 3 extra days.
But I think there's also the argument on whether DAB should even be a misdemeanor, and that we can go back and forth on that one. But so you did bring up a really good point, and that is to take a look at the strangulation cases and automatically saying those are going to Gwen's Law, because
And that's reasonable.
And with strangulation cases, as you know, the victim's chances of being murdered by this individual increase by 700%.
Correct.
So there is already kind of this lethality pattern around strangulation cases where you can already say, just based on data across this country, that the propensity for violence to escalate between these two intimate partners is significant. Therefore, you could say that you could do in global Gwen's Law hearings for strangulation cases. I think that alone would be a big victory for DV advocates who've been kind of pushing on this for quite some time.
Well, and that's what it's just the timing with all the other stuff going on. But Andre and I are planning to sit down and actually do just that, look at, or maybe it may end up being, DA Williams and I, but right now we're looking like it's probably going to be me, Mr. Godin, and Miss Avery sitting down looking at, and then we'll of course bring the deputy chief in and looking at where that cutoff should be. We just don't, I don't think we have the ability. I don't think the DA's office has the ability. I don't think the sheriff's office has the ability to hold everybody arrested on a domestic abuse in jail for an extra 3 or 4 days for the purpose of a Gwen's Law. I do think that there are certain things that are Gwen's Law eligible, and I think we need to just sit down and make a firm rule. If we've already decided to do that, it's getting it done.
Yeah, I think strangulation, and even those on the aggravated DV cases where a firearm is used. I mean, because from what I understand, there's been situations where a victim has been shot, actually shot at and hit, and a Gwen's Law hearing hadn't been granted. So I think that's another,
Was it not granted or not requested? Because that's two different.
From what I understand, it was requested and not granted. So, but I think that would be and check with the DA's folks. But I think that would be, another firm example, because once again, there's been a firearm in the home, a firearm utilized against an intimate partner. Now, once again, you raise the chances of this intimate partner, the victim,
Right.
Losing their life, being murdered. It's now 5 times their chances of that occurring. So, anyway, as you all know, I'm very passionate about this issue and I want to be able to help you all and whatever you need. If you need additional resources to hold more Gwen's Law hearings for these very severe and violent cases, let us know what you need. The district attorney, when I mentioned this to his office, we said one of the things that they believed they needed was an additional ADA in their domestic violence unit. And so I talked to the CAO, we provided the funding to them and they hired a new ADA 3 weeks ago and she just started to just work in the domestic violence unit. So they needed to grow their unit to meet the needs and we were able to help them. Whatever you all need in this regard, please let us know as well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And then similarly, we've also over the last year been growing our domestic violence monitoring court program, pretrial and post-disposition.
Right.
We've hired 4 additional case managers this summer. They are all going through training. We just had several meetings within the last couple of weeks to include the training that they received a couple of Fridays ago, but we've been meeting with them. We all met with them last Thursday to talk about the caseload. And as you already know, we're developing this specialty DV court, which will focus at this point on those cases where a person has either pled guilty or been convicted of DV, and it will focus on high risk offenders. Those that are repeat offenders, those who've been involved, looking at their history, what type of criminal history they have, what types of, if they have failures to appear, if there are violations of protective orders, because as you've already said, part of the handicap for us is that the sentences for domestic abuse battery offenses are so, the sentences are very minimal. 6 months, a lot of times the felonies are amended and reduced to misdemeanors again. So you're looking at maybe up to 6 months for a misdemeanor, but for even the strangulation, even the domestic violence against a person who's pregnant, you're looking at up to 3 years. So it's the sentencing, and I think behind that, the mindset of what society views in terms of how we look at domestic violence, how we still consider, or people still consider that to be a private family matter. And so trying to balance all of those different dynamics within the family, as well as what society believes about domestic violence, is also a challenge. And but developing the DV specialty court, where we will have Judge Rhonda Douglas and Judge Lombard focusing on high risk offenders. So all judges will still monitor those who are on probation for domestic violence, but these 2 judges have stepped up to basically monitor those that are deemed to be high risk and focus on those. We have some offenders that plead guilty, they come into court, they go to the classes, they do what they need to do, and they sort of whiz through probation. We don't see them again. We have others that have continuing issues and recidivism. And so that's what the specialty court will be addressing. So similarly, we have always been working in criminal and district court, you know, to sort of evolve with the time and sort of really address the issues that we're challenged with. The city council has given us additional funds for case managers, which has allowed us to hire the 4 additional case managers. So we have a total of 6 now, case managers. 2 are dedicated to probation cases, which we have about 94 at this point, and we have about 396 pretrial clients at this point. So it's a mass, a voluminous caseload. But again, with funding from the Office of Violence Against Women, from federal court, from the federal office, as well as from LCLE with the state and the city council, we've been getting a lot of the funds. In that vein, I'm just going to take a little liberty to say that we've also put in, and we'll be putting in, a request to have an additional build out of just a small amount of space that we have left in criminal court, because we are space challenged in criminal court, but so that we can offer more space to those case managers so that they can meet with clients in private. And so the little bit of space that's left, we are requesting, and we'll be requesting in our next budget, in the budget request, that there are funds put in so that we can renovate that space, so that we can build out a little bit more for our court intervention services, which, as you know, houses drug court, reentry court, domestic violence monitoring court, pretrial services, and a number of other misdemeanor court, and a number of other services that we have.
Veterans court.
Thank you.
Councilmember Green.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are felonies being reduced to misdemeanors because of the volume, do you think, or does something change in the analysis that results in a reduction? And You can also tell me if that's a question for the district attorney.
I think that's a question
Fine.
for the district
Okay.
attorney.
Definitely.
There's nothing that involves your office, for example, or the work that you all do that results in a felony DV being reduced to a misdemeanor.
No, sir.
No, sir.
It's definitely a decision of the district attorney.
No magistrate involvement, no communications with your office or anything like
The
that.
only time there would be magistrate involvement is if for some reason there was no PC for the felony, but that would happen day one. I'm sorry, that's right, I'm talking. No probable cause for the felony, but that would happen day one at first appearance. After that, there would be no more involvement. We do not get involved in how the cases are charged by the DA's office.
When you meet with the district attorney's office, is there discussion relative to that matter?
So I can add that last week, we myself and Judge Douglas and I, as well as members of DA's office, Mr. McGowan, I think he's here today. We did meet to talk specifically about the DV specialty court and talked about some of the ways in looking at this particular issue. Obviously, judges cannot get involved in prosecution or prosecutorial decisions, but in looking at sort of globally, how do we address this DV situation? There are other instances or offenses that are also connected to domestic violence, sometimes such as a home invasion, such as a person who is a prior felony conviction, who is in possession of a firearm, who should not be in a possession of a firearm. And so that is also an offense. So it is my understanding, and of course the DA's office can speak for itself, that they are also trying to take more of a global comprehensive view in looking at domestic violence situations to see what other offenses might be encompassed.
Unfortunately, I attended a balloon launch recently, and there's so many balloon launches in our city that it's just almost incredible, unbelievable. But it was someone who was engaged in domestic violence and was released right away, and then went back to the household and perpetrated the ultimate terrible crime of murder. But I'll direct my question to the district attorney. They know what I'm going to ask, so they're here. My issue is, what can we do to reduce down to zero the number of felony DV cases that are reduced to misdemeanors? But I know that that's a layman's type question because it's very complex. I understand that, and I will always say that. But when I see the statistics that I saw in just last week's article in the Times-Picayune Advocate, and when I see by going to incidents or aftermath of incidents, the effect that it has on our community, those who are the victims, their families, their children. I went to one where it was an 8 and a 4-year-old child that was left after a domestic violence incident where someone was released and immediately went back and took out his frustrations or his criminality, his diabolical mind frame on the woman who had 2 children. We just want to see less of that happen in our city, but I appreciate the work that you all do. It's a very difficult issue, I know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, judges, before we close out on this issue, listening to the discussion and just thinking about the conversations out in the community, some of the mentoring that we do, the peer mediation that we've been involved with peacekeepers and beef mediators, and some of the high risk intervention with a couple of the guys and young women that I work with, Calvin Pep and Akim Kashif, and also talking to a few attorneys. What we're seeing in domestic violence, the training and the dysfunction is happening way before it gets to you guys. If you sit down with groups of young men and women, they're a lot more promiscuous now. They're starting intimate relationships, physical relationships a lot earlier now. And if you talk to the boys and girls, they view each other as possessions, right? So as I'm listening here and I'm thinking about this, at what point do we have an education campaign? Because if you're out there in the community, these boys and girls, 13, 14, 15, they're fighting each other. They're battling on social media. It's long before it gets to your courtroom. So at what point, and if you don't have people who are ready to intervene, then change that behavior, that escalates into something a lot worse. At what point do we start an education campaign or an intervention campaign with the schools, with the churches, with the programs that deal with them? Because it is absolutely escalating, but not just here. all over the country. And they're actually physically fighting and threatening each other from social media to at schools and in person. So just something to think about. I think we need that type of holistic effort where we're teaching kids, hey, this boy or this girl is not your possession. It's not right for you to put your hands on them. If they break up with you, if there's an argument, then that's their right to do that. And a lot of the stuff we're dealing with right now is starting extremely early. So let's think about, especially as you're working with the council members and others, how do we start to educate? Just like don't do drugs, don't beat up your friend or your partner. Just say no. Just say no to putting your hands on or threatening the young woman or the young man, because it's happening both ways. So just something to think about.
Sure.
Anything, Chief Judge, you want to add before we close out?
Well, two things. So one, I just wanted to comment on what you said. There's always been a program in the court system where judges go out to the schools and we invite the schools to come out to our courtrooms. And we have re-urged it within the past 2 years because of the increase in domestic violence and other crimes, specifically car burglaries and the such that are occurring with young people. So while I have this forum, I'm able to say if there are any schools or teachers in particular that want judges to come out to their schools or their classrooms, we are open to do that. It's just a simple call or a simple email. And I'm not just speaking for the judges of criminal district court, the judges at juvenile court, the judges at civil court, the judges at the Fourth Circuit and the Supreme Court. We are all willing to go out into the schools and try to educate our young people on that. And then last but not least, we are going to be beginning our second annual visit criminal district court as we did last year. We're going to send out letters to each and all of you so that we can show you that space that Judge Flemings Davalier talked about that we'd like to expand for domestic violence and some other things. So hopefully each and every one of you will join us again this year for our visits at criminal district court. And with that, I conclude thanking you for your attention that you've provided us today.
Any online comments? Mr. Mahdi, I think your card is for juvenile justice, right? Okay, thank you. I'll hold it until
Thank you
then.
all for having us.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Very much.
Next item on the agenda. Juvenile court. I talked to a couple of them
What's the next? You was sitting next to me? Okay.
You know, name coming up today.
She gonna have to read about it. There's a portion like a bunch of something.
That's like.
Thank you, Chief Judge Johannesburg, when you're ready. Start your.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Renard Darrensburg. I'm the Chief Judge of Orleans Parish Juvenile Court. We're happy to be here this morning. I'm joined by Deputy Chief Judge Desiree Cook Calvin. Also, I'm joined by our current Senior Judge, how to say that, Candace Bates Anderson and Judge Clint Smith, along with our Judicial Administrator, Yolanda Johnson. Judge Anderson will be making our brief presentation.
Thank you, Judge Anderson.
Hi, good morning. First, if we could all just take a brief moment of silence for our colleague. I think you all are very aware that we lost Judge Tammy Stewart, so we could just take a brief moment for her. Thank you all very much. As you can imagine, it's been very difficult for Orleans Parish Juvenile Court. So we're here again, I believe 3 months after our last meeting just to give you all some updates in regard to the progress of the court and how things are going. As you can all certainly imagine, such a devastating loss for all of us. So it's been just trying to get one foot in front of the other, but we are still here, committed to do the work. As many of you all are aware, not only with the passing of Judge Stewart, but also with the loss of that section. So having to make sure that that work is completed. And so we just start with the questions that were presented to us. I know we had had a meeting at the last hearing. As we're aware, today is August 8th. I know we were able to start a little bit later, but because we mostly all do have court dockets, we're just going to try to move through. And if you all have any questions for us, but at the last meeting, we received a letter regarding DigiCourt. I believe that we have provided some updated information from the Supreme Court. As you all are aware, DigiCourt is a program that was funded by the Supreme Court that is also being budgeted by the Supreme Court. We do court processes through DigiCourt. We find that it's been very helpful in terms of information sharing, making sure that everybody sort of knows what's going on in a centralized system. I'm one of the judges that still likes to have my records and my papers in front of me. But again, we have found that it's very efficient in terms of being able to get matters filed and into the record. You can receive input, file court documents electronically, motions, court reports, how kids are doing, keeping up with progress, even little things, address information, changes, updated telephone numbers, contacts. Also case intake to prosecutors by electronic retrieval. So that means if the district attorney's office is filing something, a petition, if motions are being filed, we receive all that electronically. It allows us to be able to have our dockets concise and to move a little bit faster. Input next actions, which also builds upon the court docket, docket preparation, completion, making sure that we have attendance, input bonds, attachments, update statutes, fines and costs, the process of subpoenas through electronic service, processes of fines and fees, the ticket system that's important to the court, and then the warrant system output as well. So it issues and recalls warrants automatically. And what we do is we update that twice daily through the clerk's office. We also have a positional process in which the prosecutor, the district attorney's office, has the ability to implement information through the intake dashboard. And this allows for processing cases by filing a petition or a screening action form to refuse or accept violations, refer to the diversion program, and input dispositions for violations. Also with the detention group, JJIC allows for the releasing of juveniles from DigiCourt once an order is received. So instead of having kids that should have been released at the end of court or the end of the day, obviously they have a process as well. So this is a way that they can electronically go into the system and make sure that that kid is ready for release. Just a continuation of efforts to be able to get things done at a faster rate and where kids have an opportunity to move faster through the system. All outside agency groups include the district attorney's office, the public defender's office, which could be Louisiana Center for Children's Rights, or the Office of Juvenile Justice, Department of Children and Family Services, CASA, as well as the Juvenile Justice Intervention Center. So all of these partners are able to input information into this system. Each group has the opportunity to review or upload their documents, print or review dockets, view custody with JJIC and as well as with OJJ. I believe the second question that had been asked by Orleans Parish Juvenile Court is, have your 2024 operating requests for the city been finalized? And really just the answer to that is no, not at this time. We're still submitting information and providing information if they need, but that has not been finalized. And I believe that our last question was, did you make any capital budget requests for next year? And we did. And we also have a representative, Mr. Sean Lewis, who has worked with us. And so he can provide a little bit more information. But a little bit of what I will give you is, okay, I believe that he's going to go into that, and he is here. I know he was here. Oh, there's Mr. Lewis. Thank you. And he'll go into a little bit about our request for capital budget. I know that Councilmember Harris is part of that, so she may have that in her capital budgets outlay as well.
Mr. Lewis, identify yourself.
Good morning. I'm Sean Lewis, project manager assigned to the JJC and the JJIC with capital projects. This morning, we've asked to give the overview on the capital projects for juvenile courts. We have item number one, which is renovation of 2 smaller conference rooms to make a courtroom that was requested by the courts. We've started this process, and the funds that we're requesting now will complete the build out of the space to include furniture, surveillance equipment, and court monitoring equipment. The next project that we have on the list is the JJC security cameras and security systems. This building has had difficulties with all the surveillance cameras. We recently replaced all the surveillance cameras, servers and head-end equipment in the JJIC building next door. They're having the same problems that we had originally 3 years ago. Cameras are failing, bad wiring and the like. And so we're requesting the budgets to replace the camera systems. Additionally, there's a need, the next item, for security fencing around the building. They've been having problems with vagrants along Bayou St. John, walking up to the building, walking into the parking lots. And the judges and the staff need a level of comfort and security at the building, and this fencing would help achieve that goal and objective. The final issue is some wayfinding signage to the building. It's the court is literally behind the JJIC, and it's very difficult to find it. And folks that go to the building have difficulty. So we're making a request to add some additional wayfinding signage on the exterior of the building as well as on the interior. And that sums up the capital projects that we requested for the courts. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that concludes our reporting for Orleans Parish Juvenile Court for this reporting period.
Councilmember Jeruso, followed by Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. First, I want to express my condolences and sympathies on the loss of Judge Stewart.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask about DigiCourt. The question we asked last time was about the DA's office and public defender being able to export data. In other words, being able to understand what's going on and showing trends. Does DigiCourt allow those offices or your office to do that? I mean, I heard about all the inputs that you can file and see what's going on. But in other words, if somebody wanted to plug in how many of X amount attempts we've had in a certain crime or what's going on over a certain month period, does DigiCourt allow?
DigiCourt, really what we use it for the purpose of is really just, I guess, for checks and balances in the sense of how we're doing our work. So for instance, you know, when I heard someone from criminal court talk about like jury trials that they had. So I just pulled through DigiCourt and I realized that since March, the last time we were here, I've had 59 trials. So we use really DigiCourt for the purposes of gathering the information to see how our docket is moving. I would probably be a better question for the district attorney of how they pull out information for DigiCourt and how they're keeping up with that information. It is a system that we're 1 year in, which we've been given some real accolades. We have to say, no, Chantel is not here today. She was actually just out on maternity leave, but the fact that we've got the system up and running in 1 year's time, but there's still a lot to develop. There's still a lot that we're learning about. Unfortunately, a lot of that calls for more money to be able to tap into different parts of DigiCourt. The Supreme Court provides for some, and so we're still working towards that. But right now, we're sort of getting used to how the system works, how we can really share information among sections. We try to use it to make sure one court, one judge, one family, one judge, make a determination of relationships, knowing that this is actually a grandmother of this child, but maybe a mother of this child, cross-referencing if a child may have necessarily have been a child in need of care or a child that was in family in need of services, because we're trying to really gauge if the child came in one time as a status offender and if that child is actually, so we're just sort of looking at different ways of how we work with the kids, but we use it more for the purposes of case management.
Okay. And then you said there are operational costs outstanding. Do you have a number on where that is from the city? I mean, I'm taking notes.
Is that operational for DigiCourt?
No, for your overall operational costs that you said were sort of outstanding from the city.
So I believe our operational costs that were outstanding, I think that was just what we were asking for capital.
So the city is squared up on personnel operating. You're not owed any money for anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Ms. Johnson can answer that, but she does a great job, has a great relationship with the CEO's office and getting those things timely and making requests. So I think that we are up to date.
It's music to my ears if that's.
Wait, it looks like she has.
Oh, sorry. We are waiting on, I think it's one outstanding ordinance for 3 positions that were given to us earlier in the year that became effective in March.
Okay.
We just have not received that, but everything is in the works.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
The last time y'all were here, we had a conversation about monitoring and ankle monitors versus phone monitoring, and there was a new system that was going to go in place. Can y'all provide an update about the monitoring system for children who are let out on bail or under supervision?
Definitely. We are currently now in talks, and we've completed it. Repath is here. We are going to be able to monitor. Repath is a system that supervises and monitors you through an application on a cell phone. This allows us to do real-time GPS monitoring, as well as allows us to make contact with the individual, as well as someone in their family and others as well. In addition to that, what Repath allows us to do is communicate with the youth in check-ins. So they're allowed to communicate back with a direct back and forth communication with the youth and with the family, something that electronic monitoring doesn't provide for. We certainly think that there's value in electronic monitoring, but what Repath and what this supervision service allows us to do is move further into the ability to monitor youth on an ongoing regular basis, and as I said, allows us to have a direct contact with them continuously.
And does law enforcement, how does it work on the back end? So if a kid doesn't check in, what happens?
Well, this is not a arrest looking for. We're not looking to institute a system to put children back in jail. What happens in that instance is we are monitoring it through our intake department and through our social workers, and we make contact with the family to make sure that the kid is okay and that they're not engaged in any other criminal activity. But that's what this is used for, but it is not connected to the police department to make arrests.
Okay, that's my question, because so many times we hear from law enforcement that such and such kid who perpetrated a crime was on a monitor that wasn't being watched or monitored.
Well,
and I just
let me
want to make
say,
sure.
we do not, Orleans Parish Juvenile Court does not have a monitoring system, nor does Orleans Juvenile Court monitor youth through electronic monitoring. The electronic monitoring system we have is a gift, and that we share from the Office of Juvenile Justice, the Louisiana Office of Juvenile Justice, that allows us to monitor youth activity over a 30-day period. And at the end of each 30 days, when we see youth for review hearings, we were able to monitor what their activity was over that period of time. What our data tells us and what national data tells us is that electronic monitoring has a lifespan. And if a youth is able to maintain themselves on electronic monitoring for a period of 30 days, behaving and not going out of the zones that they're in, we're able to remove that, because that gives us an indication that they're able to do it. If they're not able to do that, we need to be able to make the tough decision to decide that they're not able to regulate themselves and put them into custody. But that's the value, but that must be done in order to maintain the integrity of such a program. That decision is difficult, and police have a difficult time with that decision, because sometimes it requires them to monitor and go see kids when they are at home.
So this new system, it has a GPS aspect of it. So a kid can't go out of certain zones or should be around home theoretically.
It doesn't keep them from going in any place, but it certainly identifies and gives us the ability to contact them more quickly and directly when they do it, unlike the ankle monitor.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for council members? Okay, judges, first of all, I wanted to thank y'all publicly, and I think the community needs to know in terms of what you guys did for your colleague, Judge Stewart, and not only in making sure that we were hoping that she would fare in her illness, but also in covering for her and her cases and her workload. And I know you guys did that because of your colleague and friend. You didn't want the public to know. No, but when you have a body that works together like that, that has that kind of respect and relationship, I think it's indicative of what the entire system needs to do. I want to thank all of y'all for your increased outreach. I've seen it. Judge Anderson Bates, thank you for accompanying me to school supply giveaway and meeting the families and the kids. And the one young man we talked to who was there, who was through the system, and I was intentional for you guys to have them be involved in something other than coming through the system. I think that's a solution. So to have kids who have been through your courts, actually get them involved in school supply giveaways and activities. I think it is part of the solution. One question I have is that from the town hall that I did with the kids a couple months ago to some of the relationships with the couple that I have now. We had a period a couple months ago where I think we lost 6 or 8 kids. Once they were released, they were murdered. What are we doing? And I've talked to a bunch of folk on both sides of the fence. I'm one of those who believe if you need to talk, you need to have a relationship with the folk out there who not doing the right thing. You don't condone what they're doing, but somebody needs to be talking to them about what's happening in the street. One of the things one of the guys told me was that when a lot of times when the kids are released, especially 2 of the kids that I talked to, one had a bullet here and the other couple in his body, the people who shot him are still out there. How do we, especially given the fact that I think it was 6 or 8 we lost, what can we do better to that once they go through that turnstile and they're released for whatever reason, that we can protect their life or the beef that they were in, or the people they had to shoot out with, or the argument with, so that we don't continue to see those rising numbers? Is there something the system of the community can do better?
Wow. That's a tough one. First off, it's unfortunate when we are hopeful that if we keep a child incarcerated, that would save their life. So that's kind of first where we have to start. It's unfortunate when we keep kids incarcerated because we want them to finish the school year. I mean, I've had a few who just this year alone were ready to go and said, but Judge, if I go home, how do I go back to school? So working through JJIC in the school system. So, we've talked about this for so many years that it has to start before they get to me. We've got to start, we just met with our family needed services just on yesterday, and how we've got to approach and look at the children and realize, and I think that's something that Judge Dansberg says, is that everybody who is in criminal district court was at one point a child, but every child is not a criminal. So we've got to realize, what do we do with our children? And how do we start? We start with Head Start. We start with giving them the ability to read. We start with giving them the same opportunities that we have: housing, clothing, food. We have to do a school drive every year, twice a year now. We used to only do it once a year. We do it twice a year, where we give out now not only school supplies and book bags and pencils and pens, but this year we gave out underwear and socks and uniform vouchers because they don't have the money to buy uniforms. So we have to start from the beginning to realize that we have got to take care of our underprivileged, less than not at the same economic table as some of us. And when we start doing that, then we will teach these kids opportunities to have conflict, to talk about it. What happened when we used to sit down and talk about the issues that we had? The school social workers, having social workers looking at these kids before law enforcement, that we are really having conversations about what's going on in our community. How do we talk about it? How do we teach each other to love one another? And so it starts early. It starts way before they get to us. But while we're here, we look at mentoring, we look at opportunities, we look at giving them a chance, jobs, school, placement, parks. Where are the parks? Where are the pools? Pools for the summer. Where are the job opportunities? So we have a few, and I have to give accolades to some of these programs that really gave our kids job opportunities, taught them skills, but we need more of them. There are too many opportunities and too many programs that leave our kids behind. When I say our kids, I mean the kids that come through OPJC, because I think each one of these judges feel that these are our kids. And so to carry on the mission of our colleague, and one thing y'all knew about Judge Tammy Stewart is she was a quiet fighter. She didn't come here and really participate in the city hearings because she was always at her desk doing her job. And one thing that I know that she would want is to take care of the babies, start before they get to us. If we start before they get to us, we're not going to see what we're seeing today.
Well, first of all, thank you. When your daughter and my daughter are friends, they formed their friend during camp. And of course, none of our families are immune. The 13-year-old who was just killed was a classmate and a friend of Willow. And she wants answers. Her classmates want answers. So it's having a ripple effect, because in terms of their classmates and his behavior, he was the perfect kid, not a kid who was supposed to be murdered. So it's this juvenile violence thing is having such an enormous effect, Judge Calvin, on the kids who are not directly part of that violence, but in terms of their psychology. And she's not satisfied with just the answer that the kid was shot or that the kid is dead.
Fortunately, that is a case that is currently in front of us. And so we really can't really, but it's just unfortunate for the community.
But I think it goes to your holistic approach that what we're seeing now from before they come in to the fact that a few months ago, I think the number was 8 kids were murdered when they were released. That's absolutely unacceptable, especially when we see our innocent kids, or allegedly innocent kids now, being gunned down in the streets. Where does the next generation come from before they get to you and afterwards?
We definitely want to be a part of what the progress of the community. And so a couple of things as we conclude today that we wanted to announce is 2 things. One thing is that we are on board with the trauma and the mental health issues that are occurring in our city. We are proud to announce to you all and to the community that Orleans Parish Juvenile Court has been awarded a $750,000 grant through the Department of Justice and through Congressman Troy Carter, and with the help of former Congressman Cedric Richmond, we will begin the first juvenile mental health court in New Orleans here in New Orleans. This court, thank you very much. This court is not designed around the idea that this court is designed around data, really, that told us that there are up to 70% of kids that come into the juvenile justice system that have a mental health challenge. What we did at Juvenile Court was to look at our kids and look at our data to see what the situation was right here in New Orleans with the youth that are before us. What we found in our data was that for children who are in secure care, 89% of those youth have been diagnosed with a serious mental illness. What we found was that children that are in non-secure care, 100% of those youth were diagnosed with a serious mental illness. This Juvenile Court, Mental Health Court, what it will do is allow judges, the judge's decisions are directly related to the quality and the amount of information we have when we are making decisions. What this mental health court will do is allow us for each youth, and this is happening in Jefferson Parish, it's happening in Cato Parish. Each arrested youth is given an assessment, a mental health assessment. What that will allow us to do is get in early and be able to deal with mental health issues and youth in our community. So we are proud to announce that and believe that that will go a long way to the fair administration of justice as well as to public safety. Secondly, and lastly, we will be announcing this in a press conference soon with Congressman Carter. We would love you all to be there. We'll get you the dates. Secondly, the next announcement that we have is in honor of our colleague and our heroic leader, Tammy Stewart. We will be naming our lobby, which we have turned into a library. That will be dedicated as the Judge Tammy Stewart Orleans Parish Juvenile Court Lobby Library. We partnered with the New Orleans Friends of the Library, and they will be donating books regularly to this lobby library where we have books that children can come in and take. They can read while they're there. They can take them while they're going, because in the vein of Judge Stewart, we know that our data again tells us that youth who don't know how to read by the time they leave the 3rd grade, they have a higher likelihood of being involved in the criminal justice system or for negative outcomes due to adverse childhood experiences. So we believe that this literacy initiative in our court will go a long way toward continuing her work and continuing the city being a more safe and inclusive city. So those are the announcements we have for you all, and hope that you will participate with us and join us as we begin these things.
Thank you. I have 2 cards. Mr. Johnson, you want to speak on juvenile? I know Mr. Mahdi on juvenile justice, George Mahdi first. And Mr. Johnson, you want to speak on this issue too? Okay. Mr. Mahdi, followed by Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, George Mahdi, Neighborhood Unity and Merge. We're concerned about the school, the prison pipeline, and the juvenile justice in your plan to implement juvenile justice reform. But we have several questions we want to address. We want you all to address. What strategic plan is in place to address academic failure and social trauma? That's one question. The next question is, what kind of pretrial assessment systems are being implemented to achieve these goals? And thirdly, what is your thinking concerning juvenile justice in terms of discipline, whether you prefer education or discipline? You know, as we said before, You can't incarcerate yourself out of the situation. We have to start at the cradle, not the graveyard. And that's why we have the problems that we're facing in New Orleans with crime and violence. And, life has become a graveyard for these kids. And that's just a tragedy that should not happen. So we just want your opinions on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Two great questions. Thank you, Mr. Mahdi. Any response to Mr. Mahdi from judges?
Thank you for your comments. I'll talk about one thing. I was trying to just write everything down. I know we had actually talked to the council about the pretrial assessment center. We've said that we think that's something that's very important to have, where there are actual social workers and mental health professionals. So I think that through the implementation of the mental health court, that may assist with that. But we agree with that's very important, understanding some of the traumas that these children face. Knowing what they may be dealing with prior to them coming to us. Strategic plan to address academic failure and social trauma. That's really something that the schools have to start implementing. A lot of times, I don't even realize that the kids are failing until I insist upon whether it be an appearance to answer, or once that child comes in front of me, and our youth and family specialists, which are our social workers that work in each person's court, that they actually go out and get those grades, and that the parents and the families are going out. We have talked over and over again about trying to create a relationship between the schools and our family needed services, that we have a program, the FINS program, Family Needed Services. I will say it over and over again. It's a program that if you feel like your child is in trouble, you feel like your child is not making the best decisions, you feel like your child is missing school, you feel like your child is truant, you feel that your child is having some issues, you come to our building, you go on our website. Judge Darrensburg and they have even created an app that I'm not good at, but you can actually scan it and you can actually fill out an application so that we can start assisting these kids and start addressing what some of their issues are. If you don't tell us, we don't know. And I'm gonna have on a black robe and I'm gonna be up on top of a platform almost. And so to trust me to come and tell me, hey, judge, this is what's going on, I'm not going to be the first person they'd be willing to talk to. But there are people that they would talk to, and we've talked about it, that the assessment center would alleviate some of that. And I think that you had also talked about discipline. I talk about discipline all the time, that sometimes it's not that the kids are not behaving how we want them to do, but it's about being disciplined, and that we have to make sure that the kids understand what our expectation is. But if the schools don't tell them what the expectation is, one day you can come in with a clear backpack, one day you can come in with blue shoes, one day you can come in with a white shirt, one day you can't come in with this at all, one day you can't, it's just too much. And so we've asked that we are able to work together to be able to create a situation that is more harmonious so that we have better outcomes for our children. And it does. It starts at the cradle. It starts at the beginning. It starts at the age of 0 before they get to us. And as a delinquency judge, I don't see them. And unfortunately, when I first got here 12 years ago, I didn't see them until maybe they were 14 or 15. Now we know those ages are even younger, but we've got to start before they get to us.
Okay. Mr. Mahdi, that question might go well for the new collaboration between Thrive, the City Health Department, and the school system. They just had a major press conference about a $10 million grant to deal with, or award to deal with mental health and the like. I think those are perfect to address to that group, because I think those two questions fit right into what their solutions of what they ought to be doing. And we'll direct that to them.
Yes, that's very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. W.C. Johnson, followed by Mr. Morgan.
W.C. Johnson, Community United for Change. And if I could get a few seconds of silence for the 13-year-old Black male that died over the weekend. That happened to be Mrs. Sharon Jasper's grandson. We talk about, and before, I would like to thank Judge Candace Bates for her years of service to our community as a judge on the juvenile court. I was one of the original members of the committee to present, bring, promote, and educate Kwanzaa to New Orleans many years ago. We had a lot of flack because we were introducing the culture of Africa to our community. It was so bad until they finally washed that away, until we just have an inkling of what originally was put into place here. Many people don't talk about it, but we have to at least consider the fact that our adult males and females and our adult children are killing each other because we removed a positive force in our community. And that was to uplift Black people as to who they are, where they came from, and why they are so important to this earth. Now, we're talking about people that are dying daily, and we're always putting the fault and the blame on the victim. I never hear about the 200+ years that celebrated daily in America about how America became so great. And it was through the same crime and murder that we now reject. So where are the programs to come in to at least neutralize those 200 and some years that have been steadily pushed down our throats about what makes America great and how can we begin to develop a wealth, a generational wealth system without killing each other, without robbing and stealing from each other. So we need to take a long look at the historical aspect of it and begin to implement some kind of changes that's going to bring about positive reenactment and reactions in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great Amos Wilson and Neely Fuller Jr. talk about reestablishing a code of conduct within our community, dealing with cultural competency of who you were, not who they told you were, but who you are. That's been recommended for decades. At some point, that has to happen. Mr. Morgan.
Good morning to everybody in the house. While something is in my mind and has settled in there, I like to put it out quick before I forget. What the man has just addressed is reality, and it must be taken into consideration. If it's not taken into consideration, the problem is going to get worse. And we must always remember in life that there is a greater being than all of us in this room. And under him, every scenario of life is governed by him. And when I said governed by him, when civilization of our kind denied him and turned their faces against him, we faced time and crisis like this. I remember when I was a kid going to school. I remember religion. Religion was taught, and I'm gonna tell you, religion did a lot in my lifetime. I wasn't the way I was a gangster. I jacked anybody for anything I wanted. I took what I wanted. But one day, an old lady gave me a Bible, and she gave it to me to read, and that changed my life. What I'm saying, and bring it to the point, nothing works without the will of our Creator. You are the one that can go it on and ace and bring the situation that we face in our day crisis of our society of New Orleans in. And the only way to do it is to bring religion back to the school. If you don't bring it back to the school, all what you talk about, all what you try to do, you're gonna fail. Because the reason is, you're not putting God first and you're not asking for yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Any online comments? Judge Dansberg, to close us out, anything
I
else?
think that was it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you guys very
Anything
much.
we can do to help, let us know.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Mr. Chair, I would like to commend the juvenile judges for making that decision to name
Absolutely.
the library for the very dedicated Tammy Stewart, and thank you for that, and
Thanks,
make
Councilman.
sure that
We
we're
will
there.
definitely invite you.
Make sure we're there.
Next item on the agenda is District Attorney.
How are you? We got, that's some activity under this table. You play me in, it's a good speech, put in nice, great, that's a good speech, it's on. Yeah, you want up at this. Slide starts. Yeah, we had a real expert involved in it.
The other harsh reality is that our city is
Thank you guys for appearing while he's uploading your report. We look forward to hearing from you guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas, and thank you, Chairman Jeruso, and thank you to the other council members.
DA Williams, you can start when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for moving forward with these hearings with such fidelity after they begin. Today, I'm joined here by First Assistant Edward McGowan, Chief of Screening. On my right, Andre Godin Jr., Chief of Staff, Micah Entz, and Chief of Operations and External Affairs, Keith Lampkin. I'd like to just start off by stating that our goal at the DA's office has been crystal clear from the very beginning: safe streets and fair courts. A lot of people make a lot of noise about the term progressive when it relates to law enforcement, but they don't talk, that word doesn't get bastardized the same way you talk about heart surgeons or scientists. To progress means to move forward, means to be smarter than you were the decade before, and that is the goal of the Orleans Parish DA's office. We aim to create a modern prosecutor's office that is just as informed about crime as we have been resolute in dealing with it, rooting out those root causes, being specific about the individuals that are arrested, making sure that we can prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt. We have been actively seeking out capable individuals who believe in this mission and are interested in this very, very difficult work to come to the DA's office. While we have faced attrition like many of our peers in law enforcement and many of our peers in business, with the help of motivated leadership and countless community partners, we have doubled down on our recruitment efforts. We have recently engaged with universities and law schools. On 6/14 of 2023, a workforce roundtable facilitated by Michael Heck and by the leadership at GNO Inc. With representatives from Loyola, Delgado, Tulane, Southern, Dillard, and NOLA BA. And that was quite insightful because, as you all know, after the summer of racial justice reckoning, when we were all in our homes because of the shutdown, there have not been as many women and men who want to work in DA's office, who want to prosecute, who want to be police officers. That has changed. The pipeline has changed. And so what we are endeavoring to do with GNO Inc. and all of the local universities in Southern Baton Rouge and LSU, we've learned one of our most effective ways to recruit is to build that pipeline back that once existed to law enforcement jobs, particularly for ADA hires. We received very positive feedback and good ideas from the leaders in those universities and colleges and law schools. And we're putting some of those ideas into action already. We're already seeing traction. One of the things that one of the leaders from one of the law schools mentioned was that oftentimes the poorest time or the poorest period for many lawyers is, while they're in law school or while they're prepping for the bar, and they can't come work in the DA's office with a volunteer internship program. And so we started working with former Judge Karen Friedman in Biden's Innovation Lab to work on grant funding to pay law students so they can come clerk in the DA's office, and so they don't have to starve in order to do good work. Recently revamped internship program created with the input from this workforce roundtable aims to help address this by paying these 2L students to spend the summer with us, receive that training while they work, receive compensation so they can eat while they're working, and receive priority interviews for job and job offers for future positions with the DA's offices if all goes well. ADA recruiting. One of the biggest gaps leading to deficiencies comes from the frequent turnover that has existed since the days of Mr. Connick. It's a hard job and people burn out quickly. However, we're optimistic that training improvements and increased pay are helping out with those retention efforts. Our homicide unit is now fully staffed with attorneys with a combination of outside hires from the FBI, from private practice, former prosecutors, and we've increased the pay to help pull in the best talent. District screeners, now fully staffed with attorneys. Chief Godin is going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. And that is a truly exceptional, groundbreaking idea that has not existed in the city before and doesn't exist in any other DA's offices in the state. Special Victims Unit. Recently, we created a new Special Victims Unit, and we're endeavoring to build that out to focus on the non-SACI sex crimes and the severe child abuse cases. Veteran sex crime screener Alicia Bennett, an ADA who has served this office in various capacities since 2006, was tapped to be a leader and lead that unit because she was already leading in the realm of SVU. We're still mapping out that transition of those cases, but that should be fully operational later this fall. Just a couple of weeks ago, we spent a good amount of time at Children's Hospital at the Audrey Hepburn Center with the staff that meets with young people when they first divulge their victimization. And we're working on trying to create some economies of scale and some other collaboration, potentially housing some NOPD, SVU assigned detectives, some prosecutors, DCFS workers in the same facility where these doctors and nurses are, so that when a young person has to describe the horrific thing that happened to them, they don't have to keep bouncing around to different offices where the adults are housed to tell that story. They tell that story once, and then the adults can take their proper action, whether they be doctors, whether they be lawyers, whether they be police. Magistrate Court. We still have some attorneys who are learning and being trained to work in the magistrate area, but we are fully staffed. Trials, we have 4 attorney vacancies as of today, with a new hire coming on soon, bringing that vacancy number down to 3, and we are interviewing on a regular basis. We also have several conditional hires awaiting bar results. Assuming at least half of those individuals pass, we should end the year in a very good position in terms of ADA staffing. It will take these new attorneys a while to adjust to the fast pace and rigors and gain the experience they need to work at Tulane and Broad to be operationally efficient. But our more experienced attorneys are prepared to help them and mentor them. Child support enforcement, civil rights, juvenile appeals, sufficiently staffed for the time being, but we're always hiring and interviewing in all of these areas because we know attrition is a constant threat. DV screening, domestic violence screening, sufficiently staffed now with the thank of this council with 4 attorneys. Thank you to this council for the recent funding that has allowed us to bring that staffing level to 4 ADAs committed to just domestic violence cases. Our domestic violence screening attorneys now assist the magistrate ADAs by reviewing each gist and attempting to make contact with domestic violence survivors prior to that first appearance, in addition to conducting Winslow hearings and screening all domestic violence cases. This is a huge undertaking because first appearances occur every single day of the week, including all holidays, including all weekends. On weekdays, the court has started doing first appearances twice a day as well. So we're monitoring that workload to determine the most efficient way to cover those needs. Recently, our office has collaborated with stakeholders from the NOLA Coalition and GNO Inc. to explore ways for the DA's office to work with higher education partners to help create long-lasting relationships that will benefit all parties to make this work stronger. We have concentrated our efforts on attracting candidates from colleges and universities at the earliest stage possible. To approach this, we're trying to engage in year-round connections to benefit students, interns, and even law students at first week in law school to make them excited about public service work. I'm excited to say that we are working with partners to develop a pipeline for law enforcement, not just for the DA's office. We're working with these universities to try to create a pipeline for free tuition or tuition forgiveness for police officers as well. And then to set up a pipeline for those police officers to one day become investigators in the DA's office. And oftentimes, if possible, to prioritize positions for those individuals who might want to go to law school and continue that work and be lawyers in the district attorney's office. Again, creating a pipeline the same way they've done at TFA so that people can start thinking about jobs as lawyers long before they decide what they're going to major in undergrad. Also, later this quarter, I look forward to personally further advocating this work of the office by engaging with more bright young minds by addressing Southern University Law Center and the LSU Black Law Students Association to hopefully inspire them to want to become prosecutors. We'd like for you to meet one of our newest additions, Carissa Justice. Our office was pleased to welcome a force multiplier for victims and witnesses in addition to our first facility dog. Carissa is highly trained. This is not Pollyanna-ish. She is highly trained to assist people with special needs and can help traumatized victims and witnesses calm down before they testify in court or calm down after they had to talk about a traumatic event. Carissa was provided to our office free of charge by our partners with Canine Companions. Big thanks to ADA Megan Falcon, who participated in this intensive training, whose idea this was. And she worked to create this at no cost to the office. After being matched, ADA Falcon will serve as Carissa's primary caretaker. Our office is grateful for the impact that Carissa has already had on our staff and on our survivors and victims and next of kin. And we're very excited about how she will help the DA's office better serve crime victims moving forward. It's safe to say that our young victims will find this this addition to change the hours they sometimes have to spend in our office. I talked to you a while back about a young child victim who had a large portion of her scalp and burnt and back burnt off by her mother and stepfather. And I can tell you that it takes countless hours to get a young person to relax enough to testify in front of strangers. And Carissa will help us get to that point and help walk those young folks over. And it'll be a game changer in moving forward with cases before that sometimes fell apart because the young person just could not find it within themselves to testify. New tools and new opportunities. While transparency and increasing woman power and manpower in our office is essential to the office's work, we're also committed to taking significant actions to keep identifying the newest tools and newest opportunities to help us increase safety in the city of New Orleans. The fact of the matter is the criminal element and perpetrators are embracing technology at a clip that is faster than the way that law enforcement is embracing technology. To address the public's request for increased communication and focus on survivors and victims, we created district screeners. And that was the brainchild of the man on my left, Andre Godin. So I want him to really explain that to you because Andre had an opportunity to testify before this council, before I was even DA, to work to find funding for innovative tools. Innovative tool at that time was ODMAP, was using the data collected from EMS, coroner, police department to reduce the number of overdose deaths in the city. Andre is an innovative thinker. He is always looking around the country about things that can be brought to New Orleans. ODMAP is something that he worked on while raising his family at night. He wrote the grant to make that happen so that he would not have to ask the city council for funding. So I'd like to ask Andre to walk you through the district screening process to see how it mirrors the work that you all do with constituents and the work that district commanders do with constituents.
And DA Williams, simply, you're embracing technology now.
We have to. We don't have enough people to not embrace technology. We have to step and be ahead of the game.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, DA Williams. So over the course of 2023, we've reorganized our screening division to shift focus away from specific specialization. And by that, I mean, the traditional way was that we would have ADAs focus on one particular flavor of crime, either gun crimes of violence, domestic abuse, battery, property crime, persons crime, et cetera. And what that did was that meant that these ADA screeners were taking a random sampling of crimes from throughout our city and losing their ability to understand the patterns of crime that were occurring and the unique problems that were special to each of our NOPD police districts. So we reorganized the screening division over the course of Q2 of this year and began the hiring process to bring in 8 district screener assigned ADAs whose sole function is to handle the cases coming out of each of those specific NOPD police districts. And I'm happy to say that as of this week, we will be fully staffed with all 8 employees in place. In the 1st district, we have Mr. Daniel Shanks. The 2nd district, Ms. Shari Scott. The 3rd district, Mr. Joe LeRae. The 4th district, Ms. Susan Chiravella. The 5th district, Mr. Lance Angolia. In the 6th district, our newest hire, Mr. Stephen Shapiro. In the 7th district, Ms. Lisa Parker, and in the 8th district, Ms. Graham DuPont. Each of those ADAs is making relationships and forging ties of communication with those district commanders to understand their unique needs, to understand training deficiencies, to understand cases and types of cases that are cropping up time and time again, and to be advocates for resources to go to those NOPD police districts and to assist them to our fullest ability to combat crime and increase public safety. But we didn't stop there. As the DA mentioned, using data to help drive innovation, was an important part of what we're trying to do at the DA's office to increase efficiency and to maximize our limited city resources. So through the reception of a BJA grant to fund a analytical tool called risk terrain modeling, we are launching in conjunction and with approval from Police Chief Woodfork, a New Orleans Public Safety Collaborative pilot program focused on the 1st, 5th, and 8th NOPD police districts. I come bearing gifts today. Dr. Joel Kaplan and Dr. Les Kennedy came down for a workshop about a month ago where they presented to a joint meeting with a number of different stakeholders across our community the concepts of risk-based policing. And I brought a copy for each one of the council members today. May I approach the rostrum?
Thank you.
It's a short book, and as a lawyer, I appreciate it doesn't have too much math, although it does lay out the mathematical principles of this analytical technique. To put it shortly, risk terrain modeling focuses on the places that drive crime. And by understanding the places that drive crime and the geographical or urban geography elements that help bring crime to an area and how they might increase the risk for victimization around certain parts of our city, allows us to marshal resources beyond just the traditional boots on the ground law enforcement approach. This entire risk terrain modeling is all built out to support what's called data-informed community engagement. And that is to empower and democratize the data that we're collecting from the various sources across the city. And that's not just the dots on maps about the location of crime occurrences. It's the data being recorded by 311 and the Llama system for the city government. It's about where the streetlights are out, where the blighted properties are, where the restaurants and bars are located, where there are pothole complaints. The list goes on ad nauseum. And we're trying to chart and categorize and include all those data points within risk terrain modeling, where we then apply this technique to understand where those risky areas are and maximize our limited city government resources in support of the NOPD mission to increase public safety in every single act that they do. I want to stop and just appreciate that that is a stupidly radical concept, right? That we're going to say, let's let one of the two existential threats to this city, right? Water and crime, be the focus of what this city government does, because you are already expending taxpayer dollars and putting city government work out there in the streets, fixing streetlights that are out, trying to remediate blight, trying to fix and hold through your zoning ordinances the development of economics. All those things, right, should be serving the overarching goal of public safety, where we can maximize our limited resources to support the mission of the NOPD and to support the observations that are hard fought and hard won by those district commanders in each of our NOPD police districts and by the patrolmen on the ground, seeing that scene, seeing the activity in their districts every single night. This is an absolutely bottom-up, street-driven, data-driven approach that has borne fruit not just, and has potential to bear fruit, not just in New Orleans, but has already borne fruit and generated statistically significant reductions in targeted crimes in other cities. Words of Pablo Picasso, good artists borrow, great artists steal. Or maybe Paul McCartney stole it from him. We're going to steal good ideas and apply them in New Orleans where they've already shown efficacy. The Newark Public Safety Collaborative up in New Jersey was the first iteration of this concept. And it put together Rutgers University with members of the city of Newark and the Newark Police Department to use these risk terrain modeling concepts, this analytical tool to drive city action across the board. They had statistically significant reductions in armed robberies. They used public service campaigns to try to notify the public what was going on. And most importantly, they co-opted community groups to be co-authors of the solutions for public safety. Too often, we depend solely upon the New Orleans Police Department. Hey, New Orleans Police Department, go out and solve our public safety crime and good luck. We all have to make a collective lift, and that means the community has to be part of the solution too and have a voice and agency in coming up with creative solutions that help solve these problems. Examples of other DICE strategies from other places that have already rolled out this include a safe passage program near schools that allowed social workers and members of the PTA to be present on street to allow that those kids that are being let out of school in high crime areas weren't victimized by those same high crime areas. They use data-informed approaches to choose which streetlights to repair first, to focus on maximizing the limited dollars that we have to fund that project. They found that affordable housing was increased in safety when they identified lower income housing that was near blighted property. They focused on fixing those blighted property, remediating those first, and trying to turn them into more affordable housing. They had an auto theft crime reduction strategy that focused on trying to put out public service. They co-opted the public schools into developing flyers to notice people of what was going on and what areas of town were at highest risk for auto thefts. They reduced robberies near ATMs by posting flyers to let them know that at certain hours during certain days of the week, they were at an substantially increased risk to be victimized as victims of armed robbery. They let the data drive the bus in this decision-making process, and then they let the community engage with that data in a way that allowed them to come up with creative solutions that I, as a prosecutor at 619 South White, would never have thought of. One of the more interesting ones that I came across in the Newark approach was that they had a number of corner stores, or what they call up there bodegas. There were centers for crime. Individuals would loiter outside the bodegas. They would blend in with drug dealers, people who had to go and wanted a warm meal. There was no other place to go. It was a food desert. The only place to go to get food in their belly or buy a cold beer was that bodegas. And so we forced a bottleneck of all of our population to go through that one little high crime area in order to put food in their belly. They said, listen, let's stop the food deserts and let's put economic development behind putting a grocery store in that neighborhood. Now, me as a prosecutor, the idea that a grocery store can be a tool to fight crime is not something I learned in law school. But what risk terrain modeling does is opens up these solutions, not just for me at the DA's office, but for you on that rostrum to come up with innovative solutions that drive our community towards engaging with this public safety problem and innovating solutions that help us do a collective lift. It can't just be on the NOPD to arrest our way through this crime or the DA's office to prosecute our way through this crime problem. It's got to be a collective lift that engages the members of our community and empowers them to be part of the solution. So I'm, as you probably can tell, very, very excited about getting this pilot program off the ground and running. We've worked very closely with members of this council in several of our meetings that we've laid out. I provided these books for you today. I suggest you read them. They're excellent. They break down the concepts of how we can use all the tools of city government to support the NOPD and its mission for public safety, and I will be one of them. We've also got new legal strategies in place. The recent addition of the 14107.3 criminal blight statute was made more robust by recent additions in this last legislative cycle. Not only that, we worked with Representative Mandy Landry to add it to our list of viable racketeering prosecutions. That means if we find a enterprise in the city of New Orleans who makes it their business to produce the crime-inducing kind of criminal blight that's a threat to public safety in the neighborhoods of our city, they are now susceptible to prosecution for racketeering, which is a felony offense carrying up to 50 years. So I hope they are on notice that if they are not going to comply with the efforts of Tom Mulligan over in code enforcement and bring those housing units into compliance with good governance and code enforcement, that they are going to be susceptible for these prosecutions, because this is a tool that we can all use to try to erase those criminal, risky areas that are driving the people of New Orleans out of the city. We're also working very closely with our district commanders to develop target lists, those bad actors, those businesses that are more or less allowing criminal activity to run rampant across their districts, that they're being called out to time and time again, to come up with innovative solutions supported by or really driven by the NOPD observations and the boots on the ground. And make no surprise when I come back to here in the coming months requesting ordinances that are driven by those particular observations of those NOPD districts. Because by supporting that effort, we can really turn the tide on what we're facing on the streets of New Orleans. So this pilot proposal has been approved. We're going to be rolling it out, are hoping to have our first public safety collaborative meeting sometime in mid-October. We're working back from that to develop all the community partners and find the list of people who are the appropriate participants who can actually provide action based upon this data. And then backwards from that, from right now, where we're trying to put the data team together to gather all those various bits of data, share them in a way that we can all see them with complete transparency and have an apples to apples comparison across the Board of Criminal Justice between the DA's office, the NOPD, the Sheriff's Office, and the criminal district court system. So the challenges are immense, but the rewards are absolutely promising. And I hope you can take a time to read this relatively short book and see some of these principles in action. The Newark Public Safety Collaborative has a website. You need only Google it if you want to see some of their ideas. There's also been rolled out in Atlantic City, New Jersey. There's also been a pilot program, I believe, in Milwaukee. And finally, we had members of the Kansas City Police Department come down during our workshop and present some of their great strides in making this change happen. So I appreciate the time, DA Williams, and letting me present these ideas, which I am very enthused about and very excited about the community engagement that we can do together to co-opt the people in New Orleans into this solution.
DA Williams, in 1998, two obscure council members, Susie Terrell and Oliver Thomas, commissioned a report from LSU on the law of crime concentration and with poverty concentration. Dr. Scribner from LSU did a report around alcoholic beverage outlets and outlets that promoted smoking, where there was drug distribution, and you could draw a circle around all of those outlets historically, not just when the study was done, but before, to see where crime was happening. Noted criminologist, Dr. Wiesber, he is the author of the law of crime concentration. Historically, cities have been fighting crime. When Stevie Wonder could walk up to a map and he could point to the same hotspots that have existed for the last 30 or 40 or 50 years. Even back to New Orleans, when Irish and Italian immigrants were slaughtering each other in the early 1900s over territory and space. The challenge has always been getting everyone who work in these different silos, and not just government agencies, but along with private business and nonprofits and social service agencies to come to the table. The data's been there. The most latest report was done by Dr. Sunita Singh at Tulane University, along with Dr. Penny, to also with that map where high concentrations of poverty are, where you can predict not only outcomes with education, you can predict the types of crimes if you could just walk up to the map of New Orleans and put a circle around where crime is reported, from domestic violence to juvenile crime to murder, historically in this city for the last 6 decades. So the question is, so first of all, thank you for making this public, because maybe given your credibility, it'll give some credibility to lowly people like me and Susie Terrell and Dr. Penny and some others. But the challenge has to be for the criminal justice system, along with resources, to target this is a solution. It is, and it's worked everywhere it's been done, but it's never been sustained. In inner cities, we're constantly on that roller coaster where we suppress crime, we make a few investments, and then we move on to the next best thing. So my question to you is, how do we make this effort sustainable, given the fact that it's tried and true, been done before, and it works?
So one of the important things, as we develop these ideas, as we develop the district screeners with the DA and that concept, we wanted to make sure that we had buy-in from the first major partner, and that was the NOPD. They had to be a part of the solution. They had to be willing participants. And so we went and talked to the district commanders themselves, and then we presented this idea at the head max meeting with all the NOPD brass in the room. And they were enthusiastic about its adoption, and we got approval to roll these concepts out. The second part has got to be, and the DA's office, is a tail of the NOPD dog, so to speak. But the second part has got to be city government. It's got to be putting Department of Public Works, sanitation, public health, code enforcement, all on the same page in enforcing and supporting these roles. Now, I want to demonstrate proof of concept with this full buy-in from the NOPD in these target districts as a pilot program. And the great thing about the approach that we're promoting is that it's a data-driven approach, meaning we're going to put that data out there. We're going to share it amongst the group and the participants. And we're going to say, listen, we want to run these initiatives in response to what the data is showing. And then over the next month, 2 months, quarter, biannual, we'll present the actual numbers of whether the targeted crime, let's say it's auto burglaries or armed robberies, whether we actually had statistically significant reductions that justify the continued engagement with that particular initiative and in that area. And the lessons we learn from this pilot process can then be applied to the whole city. So I think that the most important thing is to demonstrate proof of concept by bringing these disparate parties together in this pilot where it's, look, it's a measurable, it's a quantifiable, and it's a relatively approachable area of the city that's in one contiguous block that has a broad mix of light industrial, dense urban, residential / urban, and even pastoral, and bring those together and see if we can't make inroads and show a demonstrable success. And when I do, you can better believe I will be back here with members of that group, touting its success and advocating for more adoption and more engagement. But I believe that we have great allies in the form of the city attorney's office, the director of code enforcement, Department of Public Works, economic development. And we've been working behind the scenes as we rolled out the district screener initiative to bring those people together in a room. Keith Lampkin has been a mastermind in getting all these parties together. And it's been a wonderful opportunity.
Well, he is a mastermind.
He is. But I tell you what, by and large, every single one of these agency group heads, they are crying out, not for leadership, but crying out for direction that supports the mission of this city in producing a safe, dry environment for the people to live in. And so if we can all put that as our lodestar, as our guiding principle, as our focus on what we do with every tax dollar we spend here in this city, then I think we really can see a difference on the streets of New
Well,
Orleans.
there's some other modern day components. We'll talk about that off air because there's a major conflict in our community right now that's driving the cheap fentanyl trade, that's driving gentrification, that's driving major displacement from African-American middle class and entrepreneurs. And we haven't come to terms with that piece yet. And how we deal with that is going to maybe affect some people. There are a lot of people who shine their halo, right? And sometimes they shine their halo not knowing that they're having double harms for the community that's being run out or gentrified in the community. But we'll talk about that offline. Thank you.
Well,
That's a solution, though.
Mr. Chairman, you hit the nail on the head about the work that you and Councilperson Terrell did many years ago in terms of looking for root causes. In your old district and Councilperson Harris's district, there used to be a daiquiri shop on St. Charles Avenue across from like Raising Cane's. And there was a regular shooting, stabbing that would occur at this spot because of loitering. And now it's an urgent care and there have been no incidences since that happened. In your district now, there are problematic apartment complexes that are breeding crime, drug cells and violence. And we've been able to source out and discover that many of these apartments are owned by out-of-town companies that make it their business to have derelict, unkept apartments throughout the country. And it's their model. And the model is they don't need to protect them. They don't need for them to be viable and safe and beautiful and secure. But now what we're talking about is putting the individuals in front of us in the game, more players on the field to help us fix those things, and the folks behind us to help pinpoint those problem areas, because we have so many, this is an opportunity to prioritize. This office absolutely recognizes the evolving criminal patterns that exist. A lot of that involves technology and social media. Our team has started focusing on previously underutilized resources in terms of prosecuting cases. I tried a number of cases over the past couple of years. And in each one of those cases, I needed to use Instagram, social media, TikTok, crime cameras, license plate readers. All of that was necessary to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. Why? Because the people who saw the shooting did not want to come to court to testify. And we make it very clear that we're not arresting innocent people and forcing them to come to court to testify. That was proven to be the wrong thing to do. But we're using technology to step up and testify in court. We're working with Bancroft Global Solutions to help us with dealing with the volumes of open source data. Oftentimes, police officers will take one of these smart devices they find on a crime scene or find on a victim, and they will dump everything on it. But you probably wouldn't be surprised to find out that it is too much information to even go through or synthesize in a short period of time to be able to use it in court. Bancroft Global utilizes the expertise of retired NSA workers, international best practices, the same folks that assisted in finding Osama bin Laden using technology and social media. We're using that, but only with open source data to prove cases in court. Open source data mining and case hardening, that is getting us from probable cause on the street to proving a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And the one thing that I want to be clear about is we have been working with, in collaboration with the police department and Judge Morgan and the federal monitor, so that they are aware of all of these evolutions that we're bringing to bear in the city of New Orleans. Mr. Chairman.
I think Councilmember Green wants to say something, but to Attorney Godet, it's called using a microgeographic approach. That's what the noted criminologists around the world are using. Instead of this broad-based approach to citywide, how do you focus on a microgeographic approach to pinpoint what's going on in those areas? Councilmember Green.
Attorney Godin, I'd like to direct this to you. I want to thank you for your enthusiasm. I've been to meetings where you've been present, and the same enthusiasm that you're showing today is the enthusiasm that you show to members of our community. I appreciate that. So much was said already by District Attorney and yourself and even Councilman Thomas, but I just want to emphasize, I represent a district in which there are some areas where there have been no murders for a very long period of time. But it takes you just 15 minutes to get to another area where there are significant crimes involving persons. Certainly one of the reasons for that is that I also represent a district where in certain areas there's no blighted property, but then in other areas there's a lot of blighted property. For example, the Desire, Florida area, just too many overgrown lots. I didn't really want to mention a community name, and I did it already. There's so much going on that's good in the Desire, Florida area. I want to emphasize that, but I don't need to be redundant, but I just want to say I look forward to this pilot program working. There are areas that I can clearly identify, and we all can, where there's a likelihood of crime against person that is greatly exceeding in other areas. And I hope that we can work to make our community safer by using this data and using the geography and using just reality to get things done. But I really wanted to say, I appreciate your enthusiasm. And I do want to say this, talking to organizations is good, but every once in a while, and I will help, and I know our council members would help, a general meeting describing some of the things that you're doing in a community, more than just with the organizations. This could bring the public in, because sometimes people aren't members of organizations, and a lot of organizations claim to speak for things that they don't. But you hear from people about what they know that you don't know, and sometimes even I don't know about something that's going on very near them at that grocery store that we're not aware of, or at some other institution that may be, or a house that's turned into an institution, you know what I mean? The bottom line is that let's have a periodic meeting in the community where members of the public can come out, turn in some cards to you, and maybe express their concern outside of organizations which have their own, special interests.
Councilman Green, that sounds absolutely fantastic. Two reasons. One, sometimes the data will develop correlations that we don't understand why, why if you're if 200 yards away from a gas station and 400 yards away from another geographical feature, whatever it might be, an ATM or a UPS drop-off point, why that is drawing crime to a particular area. And so crowdsourcing that information, getting information from the people who live in those neighborhoods, who might be pulling down the blinds and have an idea of what's actually happening better than I do at 619 South White, is absolutely essential to making this project work. Number two, I absolutely will rely on the men and women of this council and their constituent services and the relationships they have developed painstakingly to help us understand the ins and outs of these particular NOPD police districts and understand the power that's in those districts to bring together community action and support community action on this particular goal. So I absolutely am relying upon the men and women of this council to bring that focus together, to bring that nexus together. And meetings like that sound ideal.
Okay. Thank you. I'll help in whatever way I can. I know our other council members will to get the turnout to be what it needs to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Harris. Councilwoman Harris.
Thank you. Council lady. Andre, I just want to say thank you. I know you and I and some of Keith walked various areas in District B where we know that there's a high concentration of crime. So my question, I do have a question. How long is the planned pilot program in these 3 police districts, the 1st, the 5th, and the 8th? What is the pilot timeline and when can we see, for example, it come to the 6th district?
So I spoke with actually members, Dr. Kaplan and members of the risk terrain modeling group up in New Jersey yesterday, and they said we are ahead of schedule as far as our rollout of this particular program, and that we've got a good job of marshaling the resources. Working back, to an October start date, I got to be honest, I think the October start date will be a lot of introduction to the concept, and won't be a lot of a direct call to action. But I think by the 2nd or 3rd of these monthly meetings, we'll begin to see initiatives piloted out of this particular approach. Once we start having initiatives pilot out of the approach, I think it's a question of measuring efficacy. So I think we want to see if we begin, let's say by October, November, December, we've got some solid initiatives that are launching out of this thing. I think we would probably see over Q1 of 2024 whether those were effective. And we'll be returning to these each month and seeing if we can measure statistical reductions in crime. But once we develop a kind of a model concept and we've got the people in the room that will form the nut of the tree that's going to grow in the other districts, I'm down. I'm ready to launch this citywide, but I don't want to start this process off with too big of a bite and then have it falter just because of the size of the project. So that's why, based upon recommendations from a number of individuals, it was from Dr. Kaplan himself, it was from Mr. Goyeneche from the Metropolitan Crime Commission, it was from the DA Williams about how we can try to get this with all the different parties in the room to grow in a way that's organic and grow in a way that draws trust and community organizers in to make them part of the solution. That needed to be a smaller subset of the city and not the whole city at once. So I'm eager. I'm an eager beaver to say, let's launch the whole thing. But I want to show proof of concept and then show that to the council people here and say, look, this is working. Let's do it in a bigger scale. Let's talk about ordinances in support of it. Let's talk about funding in support of it. Let's show that this is actually a viable idea that really we can take and run.
And this doesn't preclude action in areas that we know are hot spots,
Absolutely
right?
not. Councilman Thomas stepped away right now, but the 7th district has a lot of RTM viable targets in the sense that there are properties that if you look at those properties with this data set, I think we can identify bad actors in the system, whether that means using our criminal blight tools, or whether that means, community engagement at certain locations, whatever the solution might be. I think that those locations are very susceptible to RTM analysis. And I'm not sitting in the DA's office sitting on this data. I'm pushing this data as fast as I can and as far as I can using our data analyst, our GIS specialist, pushing it back to the district level and then letting those districts take that data and begin to formulate solutions. We're also present through the district screener initiatives at all the non-PAC and MAX meetings. So we're attending these meetings on a regular basis through the district screener program, where we have that communication both back and forth with the district commanders, with the people in the community who are attending the non-PAC meetings, and getting that data source open and that communication channel free and clear on both ends.
Yeah, Mr. Lampkin, I would like to meet the new district screeners, Mr. Shapiro in the 6th. I didn't catch the other names, but if we could get a meeting set up with Allison. And I think you're absolutely right, working with our constituent services people because they know exactly where the complaints are coming in. Sometimes their information is more accurate than 311, which we know is faulty. And so I think having close connections with our constituent services where we can identify, hey, this house has been a problem, or this is a real example. The community is telling us that this is the person who's breaking into churches, Bethlehem Lutheran Church, for example. We have a name and we can get it to you, we can get it to NOPD, but I think the community input and having our constituent services people in the room or at least in communication is going to be critical for your goal. I mean, frankly, I think this is where the Violent Crime Task Force, which is now, I think, defunct, could have gone. And so I'm happy for your enthusiasm. I'm happy that you're going to actually carry the ball across the line. And I'm happy for what this can potentially portend in our various districts. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Harris, gave us a really solid idea. Keith, can you make sure that all of the district screeners, when they change, are introduced to the council people? And that if we can set some sort of regular battle rhythm so they can check in with council members about things that they may see or things they may be hearing about?
Councilperson Jerusalem. Not councilwoman. All right. Good afternoon. I thought Leslie may hit this. I appreciate that you're trying to take this multidisciplinary approach, but sometimes when you have, I think, Mr. Diaz, you recognize 3 to 5 different agencies you're trying to coordinate with. You have 4 quarterbacks, you have none. So who's the point person on the city side? If you all say, we're going to go target X spot in the 7th district, and we want code enforcement, safety departments, DPW, whatever other agencies to be there, who leads that on the city side?
You want to take it, Andre?
So that's a relationship we're building right now. We bring in those agency heads. We met with the Department of Public Works head. Keith helped set up meetings with Tom Mulligan at Code Enforcement, working with all the different agency heads. We're having them attend some of our bi-weekly district screeners meetings so they can be briefed in on what this approach looks like. But that's the coalition we're attempting to build. One of the interesting things about the approach, and I agree, it'd be nice to have a champion, a central point of contact on the city side. But one of the interesting things about this approach is that it uses the data to drive action, but it doesn't need to be a top-down approach in the sense that Councilman Harris's criticism of the VCR, which is a very top-down driven approach to law enforcement. This is about presenting the data in a way that each respective group, each respective agency, each respective community organizer, each respective philanthropic organization, they all can consume equally amongst themselves, meaning they might do one thing and somebody else might do another and somebody else might do a third. And I don't require that all 3 work in conjunction in every single respect. What I require is that they respond to the data in a rational way. And if they do that, that I think is the lodestar that drives collective action, not necessarily a top-down authoritarian approach.
I agree with you theoretically, but I've been here long enough to know in practice that doesn't always happen. And so I'm trying to extend a helping hand to you because my view is, and again, I'm piggybacking on Councilmember Harris said, is when you had the Violent Crime Task Force, you typically had somebody at the top who you could say, this is who's in charge of these things. And I think we consistently say public safety, and I think all of us agree we have to deal with root cause issues. You have to deal with blight in neighborhoods. It's not just arresting somebody. My grave concern is by having so many different departments that without a person who's in charge, how does that get facilitated? So that's what we want to help you to achieve the goals that you are. And candidly, I don't care if it's top down, bottom up, from the middle, irrelevant for our purposes. I just want you to be successful.
Chairman DeRusso, when Andre first was describing this work to me and how it looked, what it made me think about was the huge fight you took on about hazardous sites, defunct pools with mosquito infested water in them that children could access, right? And it wasn't enough just to identify it. It was, how are we going to resolve this? Whether it is the property owner putting up adequate fencing, whether it is draining the pool and keeping it drained, whether it was code enforcement, starting the process to take the property away from the property owner. And so I bring that up to say, this is an opportunity for us to prioritize certain things so that whether it is the council, public works, the DA's office, police department, each agency is at the table to say, I got this one. I know exactly. My approach can reduce this hazard faster, right? Because sometimes the process through the city side for a problematic housing apartment might take months to resolve. Whereas if we use this RICO statute, we could hit it a whole lot faster.
Well, look, I think Mr. Godin also makes a good point is we've unlocked all these dollars for the city, and except for the health department and code enforcement, almost everybody else has had a problem spending it. So I applaud the incremental approach to get everything right. I just want to make sure you have all the tools that you, that's really where I'm headed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I ask, I don't know if you heard me ask juvenile court, but last time we asked about DigiCourt, we've met about this, and really DA's office has done a good job of putting up things on dashboards. The information that we requested that the DA's office and, to be fair, the public defender's office be able to receive, has that been implemented yet?
You know, there is, as it stands right now in real time, only one report that I've been able to see DigiCourt produce, and it is not nearly as encompassing as I know you would hope, and this council would hope, and as I would hope, as a prosecutor in those courts. Of course, it was down for a few days, but beyond that, even when it's fully functional, I don't know that it's fully functioning the way that we need to be in a 21st century criminal legal system, especially at a time when truancy is at an all-time high and juvenile crime is plaguing us the way that it is.
Well, maybe, again, trying to be solution oriented, we could write a letter along with the public defender's office to Justice Griffin and ask for the capacity that both sides of the fence need. I don't want it to be just a prosecutorial tool. Obviously, the public defender's office also said that there are reports that they would like to need and want to run. I think it sends a strong statement if all branches are asking.
I completely agree. Sunshine will absolutely be the answer here, and that will provide a certain amount of sunshine. The public is rightfully asking for more information about what is happening in juvenile court, and they should. They have a right to know what's happening there, especially when you see an individual who was convicted, who finds himself back on the street. How did that happen? And having eyes on that is a good thing, is a positive thing. DigiCourt can provide some of that information. I will note again that as it relates to crimes of violence in juvenile court, it's not a closed setting. That is open to the public. And if anyone ever tries to tell anyone from the public they can't go and observe a crime of violence setting in juvenile court, we will defend their right to be there. There's nothing wrong with a public tribunal, and the law allows that in crimes of violence. But DigiCourt is that other way that we can get that information out for the public to see what's happening behind those closed doors.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I'm not interested in naming names. I'm interested in analyzing data so people can understand where the trends are and it's not behind a curtain.
And that's what I believe DigiCourt could do, or a system could do. Give you a case number. It could give you the age of the perpetrator, what they were charged with, what the resolution was, and still not violate any of the privacy rights of a young person. And that, I think the public deserves that information.
And then the last thing I just want to say is I understand your office is integrated into BRASS, which thank you for doing that, because I know frequently we have to ask other outside agencies who get significant money for us, where are you on your personnel? Where are you operating? How come we don't have this report? So the fact that, again, you've provided that sunshine transparency is appreciated.
Anything we can do to better calibrate and coordinate with the folks that are trying to really steer this ship the direction it needs to go, we stand ready to do.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to actually add building efficiency, more efficiencies through coordination. The arrest screening working group is progressing well with all stakeholders who come together behind closed doors to make sure that the system is functioning, from arrest to screening, the CNO quality of life meetings, establishing the New Orleans Public Safety Collaborative, which was mentioned earlier. And, you know, Councilman Jerusa, I know you've taken a special focus in the juvenile justice system, and Lord knows it's needed. We're committed to stemming juvenile violence in every way, front end and back end. Howard Stevenson's program, PLAAY, the PLAY program, which teaches young people to deal with the stressors before they find themselves in stressful situations. We're growing that program. We cooperated, myself and Micah Ince worked with the City Truancy Task Force. A number of stakeholders were involved in that. I would just ring an alarm for this council as we get very close to the beginning of another school year. There are a number of our young people who are still not engaged with school systems, which means if they're not in school seats, they will be in our streets this school year. There were a number of solutions suggested and laid out in that truancy task force. I don't know the status of that, but I do believe that is something that we need to turn our attention to, because if we don't, we will continue to see poor outcomes from young people. And in closing, I would just say to this council, thank you for your work in looking at the real priorities. It's really hard to be on that dais when it seems like everything is breaking or broken at the exact same time, to figure out where money should be spent and where money should not be spent. The work that's required of the DA's office to increase safety through prosecution and holding violent offenders accountable requires partnership. It requires collaboration. And council members, I want to thank you for your time today and your continued collaboration. We will work to make sure that there are regular meetings with our district screeners. We continue to cooperate with Chief Woodford. She's been extremely helpful in the implementation of these new tools that we've been working to put in place. We're at a historic time in this city. And we need to all rise to that occasion. And there are just not enough women and men in this fight to do it, which means we've got to use technology and every force multiplier we can find to get us out of this.
Before you leave, I'll ask you the same question I asked the juvenile court judges, especially given the impact on my family and other families and my relationship with the time spent back at the Juvenile Justice Center. A couple months ago, I think it was a total of 8 kids who ran through the system, who once they were run through the system, were murdered. In talking to all the elements, I'm a firm believer that I don't think there's enough law enforcement or leadership that has relationships with people on the street. Not that you condone what they do, but they know what's going on. One of the things that I was told by guys and folk on the other side was that unless the beef is squashed, unless folk are sat down long enough to change their behavior, unless they're sat down to be programmed, given the level of retaliation and violence, there's somebody waiting for them. A couple of kids I deal with have bullet holes in them, one here and other somewhere else. Is that beef over? What are we doing to take into consideration that if we're releasing a kid right away, thinking we're giving them their freedom, but we're sending them their freedom to die, how much thought is being put into that in terms of what happens on the back end and programming and efforts to identify the perpetrators? Were you in the beef? Were you with one of those 5 crews that are at war with each other in the city? Y'all know that. I don't need to name them. But we lost 8 kids in less than a 2-month period. That's the next generation. And many of them are carrying out acts against innocent kids, like my daughter's friend who was just killed. There has to be an effort to mitigate the violence when they're released and identify who's involved so that that stops it. What kind of effort are we doing to do that?
So I will tell you that, and you're right, there's schools that see it. School leaders see that beef. And they oftentimes, some schools are reticent to reach out and call the police on their kids. Other schools, some of the alternative schools, realize they have to call the police because they don't want to lose a kid. It's a difficult space for the DA's office to be in terms of squashing that beef, because we've got to prosecute that crime. And you need individuals that I've heard you talk about before, programs like Ceasefire, programs like Silverbacks, programs like Son of a Saint, that help a young person realize that retaliation is not going to get them what they think they want or need. I took a lot of flack in my first year in office for transferring certain juvenile defendants who had committed homicides or shootings to adult court. A lot of folks believe that maybe I love young people less because I was prosecuting them in adult court. But the truth of the matter is that decision came from spending time and talking with young people.
Well, I'm gonna interrupt you because there are a lot of kids out there and they're not from our community. And there's nothing against that. They're not in day-to-day conversations with our relatives and friends who are in the streets. And they're talking about, oh, let the kid go, oh, let him go to die.
That's not good for a kid.
But there are some folk who shine their halos, right? And they do that. We don't want to keep anybody in jail, but if I can sit you down long enough to save your life and squash the beef, right? And deal with the remedies of the people that are waiting for you.
We have to redefine success.
And they're not following the data that we know, where 8 kids murdered in less than a 2-month period. All they know is they don't want any kid locked up, or they don't understand the consequences of what happens when they're back on the street at all.
In order to understand the very difficult situation some kids are actually living in at home. And there's a certain degree of violence in that home. And so oftentimes a defense attorney may think that they had a successful resolution because their defendant did not spend very long in jail. However, that young person is dead or charged with a more serious crime within a year or within a few months. And so when I made a decision to transfer certain young people, it was because I knew that 3 or 4 years and then been released to community because under the juvenile system, 21 is it. It meant that they were going to have targets on their back at 21. And I just don't believe that 3 or 4 years is enough accountability for certain crimes. And there are other interventions. This idea of jail or no jail being the only options, that's not it. We need real intervention for kids that are released and kids that we have to keep in custody. And some people, adults and young people, need to remain in custody for their own good and for the safety of the rest of the community.
Councilmember Green.
Mr. DA, as you know, on the state level, new laws, or at least one new law was passed relative to fentanyl and the impact it is having on our community. Our coroner is here today, and he's going to report that in 2022, 406 people in the city of New Orleans died from overdoses involving just fentanyl. Now, there's other overdoses too. But could you send a strong and clear message at this public forum relative to that new law and your intentions relative to enforcement of that existing law?
Absolutely. We have made it clear that we don't plan on filling up jails with folks for smoking a joint, right? There's a number of people who went and served long sentences for marijuana, and now it's legal in certain states. Fentanyl is different. Fentanyl is a pure killer. An amount that
one chip,
smaller than a dime, can take you out, and it can be inside of a capsule, inside of a pill bottle, amber pill bottle with prescription tag on it. And so I will say to any parent or any children that hear this, and any friends of friends, the same thing that I say to my teenager and to his friends. There is no safe option for experimentation in today's market, because fentanyl is being used and laced in everything. And one moment of experimentation has cost countless people their lives. It can't be controlled by the dealer. It can't be controlled by the person that's mixing it up. No one understands the potency of a drug that is being flooded in from the eastern seaboard and the western seaboard. And we are a port city, and we are a destination city, which makes experimenting with different drugs 10 times more dangerous than it would be in the Midwest or in other areas. It is worse than playing Russian roulette with your life and your future. I think every parent is scared of it. I think every parent should be scared of it. I think every young person who looks at old documentaries about what was happening in the 60s and 70s and 80s and saw the free living where you could experiment and bounce back from it thinks, well, I can too. Well, you can't because you might just die on your first experimentation.
If I can add on that very
Please.
briefly. So Councilman Green, please don't be surprised. We are working right now, Keith and I, in developing some ordinances to support an overdose fatality review. Overdose fatality review panels have been used across the country to try to glean some information and insight into the, sorry to hear, 406 souls, our citizens, our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers, who have passed this past year. And I've struggled with this problem for quite some time during my tenure at the DA's office. But this overdose fatality review process, again, I don't mean to beat the same drum, but applying the risk terrain modeling approach to that overdose fatality review process can help marshal resources. So we're going to be working on a ordinance to bring together the various disparate parties from the public of health, from the law enforcement side of things, to present this data in a behind the doors, closed door session. So there's protections for HIPAA, but to do analyses on who these people are and understand where we as government touch their lives and where maybe we could have made better inroads, better, more effective touches that might have resulted in them being derailed from the path that ultimately led to their expiration. So we are working very, very hard on this issue, and it is an issue very keenly felt across the DA's office, particularly in the screening division, and particularly with this new approach with risk terrain modeling.
We all hate to see people taken advantage of, and the coroner is going to be able to make his own report on this. But there's a predatory community out there that's taking advantage of those who are unhoused because there's such easy access to their spaces, if you will. You can go inside a tent and do your negotiations and things like that. There's so much that I want to say, but you know, I want to focus on this because it involves 406 deaths, kind of that I knew, but the coroner is here today and he's going to report it. The coroner also released kind of a statement on yesterday relative to homeless encampments and the effects that some of the disease and some of the predatory practices are having on them. So we'll talk about other things beyond, but I'm going to ask you, and you've made it clear today, that you'll use every tool available to you to go after those who are engaged in the distribution of fentanyl. They know what they're doing.
Without a doubt, and
in
any amount.
Right.
Because this is typically the criminal legal system sort of defines the seriousness of drug cases based upon the amount of the drug. Fentanyl does not give us that luxury.
I appreciate you saying that. And I know that no one here in this room, in this city, wants to have more people going to jail if we can avoid it. But at the end of the day, 406 deaths and 218 this year. So, I mean, you know, we're talking about 600 human beings killed by drug overdoses, especially drugs that are laced with fentanyl. Of all of the things that we have to talk about, I would say that is probably the most serious issue out there relative to other human beings. Let me be careful, because every issue where someone takes advantage of another human being is bad. So I don't want anybody to say, oh, he said it's more important than this. But those are people who, for example, just 3 weeks ago, I was at a building on Claiborne Avenue across from a homeless encampment, and the police officers and the coroner's office were there, and a health department official to take out an unnamed person in a body bag, who I later found died due to fentanyl overdose. It's one of the most severe sort of disregards for the value of human life that we have going on right now in terms of those people who do bad in our city. And I just ask you, as you said already, to use every tool at your disposal. Yes, it might be multiple buildings. It might be technology that the police need to use to get inside, you know, what they see going on. But it's a terrible tragedy in our city. I appreciate the fact that you are going to be focused and strong on this, because it's very symbolic, because a lot of people who distribute this drug also do other crimes too.
Absolutely, Councilmember Green. And I would just say it's almost a misnomer to call when you think about it's the way the media talks about it. It's where we all talk about it. We talk about overdose deaths. But when you talk about fentanyl, the addicted person is using the same amount they have used of a particular drug successfully in their minds, right? But the fentanyl changed everything. So it's not a situation where people are doing more of something than they normally do, which really speaks to the predatory nature of the distribution of such a dangerous drug that you're describing, because all it does is kill.
In many cases, they're actually doing less.
Yes.
And the potency is that much more. Mr. George Amadi?
Yeah, George Mahdi, Neighborhood Unity and Merge. Yeah, well, I just want to remind you that every generation went through this same crime problem and the same challenges. You know, when we talk about politics, that makes that happen. But what happens when the politics is over and we go back to the beginning and the source of the problem, which is, you know, in unemployment, lack of education. Most of our people are targeted or profiled or burned out Black people who have who the system has continually failed to educate through educational policies, racial policies, and the lack of employment options and opportunities. We've said these things before. Until you solve those problems, you're not going to solve the crime problem. Otherwise, you just have the cycle of arrests, mass incarceration, and you know, convictions that lead to the most serious crime problems and the violence that we see, just like the guns. I mean, you know, kids are not supposed to have access to machine guns. What you gonna do with a machine gun? That's a military weapon. That's a weapon that's designed to kill people. It's not for self-defense. So when you have these types of laws on the books, you know, the kids are still kids, you know, no matter what generation are. They might be a little bit more sophisticated today. They might be a little worse off behavior-wise today. But the problems still exist at the core, which is parenting, education, and the lack of jobs. Because I'm sure that if you gave these kids an option out here, a recreation option, a skill, or developing job training and job development, apprenticeships, I believe that you can solve these problems down the line and straighten, you know, and help straighten them out, because that's what they want. Because they burned out, you know, when you're talking about picking up people at the bodegas and at these various drug, you know, corner stores and all that. These are burned out people. The system has failed them earlier, and now they don't have nothing to lose. And you're making it so these young kids don't have nothing to lose either. And when these kids don't have nothing to lose, that's when they're going to start shooting and carjacking, because what you have given them was nothing. So, you know, we have to go back to the cradle and try to save them from there, because otherwise we're just going to have a revolving door from cycle to cycle, and that's not going to solve the problem for either of us.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DA, closing?
Only that we went through this global pandemic. We're still dealing with issues that plagued us before we knew what COVID-19 was. And we all know what those issues are. And it is up to us all to try to attack these issues and be smarter than we have been in the past. And we're committed to doing that. And I just want to thank this council for its level of engagement in so many different areas at once. I know how difficult it is. Thank you.
Thank you. No online comments? Next item is Sheriff Susan Hudson, followed by coroner. Yeah, that's old, no, that was done in the late nineties. Dr. Scribner from LSU. He did the study. And then the other. The Dr. Cindy the same, Dr. Penny, they've done some work around poverty, concentration poverty, and then Weisbrod is noted, one of the world's noted criminality. He talks about the law of crime, concentration. I've been talking about that since I've been here. The question is getting all of the entities on the same table to pick.
Yeah, they got it.
All right, good to see you. All right.
Yeah. What you say? Well, yeah, I'm gonna go, through everything. And we get to. We get to. Yeah, okay, don't have. I think you should. See also. Okay, so, okay. Okay, I thought we had one over, so I thought we were at the 75%. It keeps going up. It was 81 or so.
Sheriff, whenever you're ready, you can start your presentation and announce your guests.
Thank you, council member.
Thank you.
And good afternoon to you. Thank you for this invite here to talk about where we are at in the Orleans Parish Sheriff's Office as we are trying to transform our culture, work on rehabilitating our residents and connecting our communities. I'm here today with Dr. Astrid Bergden, the warden of our custodial facilities, Elizabeth Boyer, the director of finance, and in the crowd, we also have Laura Veazey, our director of external affairs, and John Williams, my chief of staff. We thought we'd start off with just an update because we've been getting questions about how she's doing, a member of our organization, and that is Deputy Francis, one of our horses. She's not just one of our horses, she's the one I ride. She's the one that the mayor has ridden in the past, other council members. So she was very sick last week. As you can imagine, this excessive heat is tough on all animals, but she suffered colic, which is a fairly serious but also common stomach ailment that was brought on by the heat. And we're happy to announce that she is well. She was able to get through that and she is safe and sound. We were getting questions about how she was doing. We thought we'd just let you know she's well.
Oh, well, thank you.
We released this week our annual report.
I'm an animal lover. I want everybody to, and
What's that?
Every creature under God to do well.
Amen. And this heat is getting us all. But we released this week under our communications director, Casey McGee. She put together our annual report which has information in it from May 2nd of 2022 to May 2nd of 2023. And we talk about, statistics about how many employees, how many people come through our facilities, information about our employees, our operating budget, the number of residents, crime victims. And then we go month by month and we just talk about issues that have occurred in our facilities or in our organization, good and bad. So we need to be able to talk about these issues, put them out there so that the community can see where we're going. So it's kind of I guess, an anthology a little bit, and we'll keep doing that so people will know, this is where we came from and this is where we're going to. So there's instant information in there about deaths in the jail, about unrest, Mardi Gras, whatever it is, it's all in there. As I mentioned the last time we were here, we're always going to just put up our core values, talk about mission and vision as we come forward. Good morning. And we always just want to let folks know, because this is our opportunity also to recruit, that these are folks we're looking for with these values. And one of the most important being respecting community leadership and understanding that we need our community to help us fix all the issues and to lead the way in fixing all the issues in our department. We've gone through our budget priorities since we got here, and we'll continue to do that. But all of our priorities are focused on running a constitutional jail and to getting in full compliance with the consent judgment. That means we have to provide care, custody, and control. And as we've all talked about, all of the actors in the criminal justice system have talked about today, the rehabilitation or help for our residents coming through adult facilities, juvenile facilities, etc. And we want that to be more humane, more responsive, restorative, and of course, community-led. And then we're working on transforming our culture inside the jail. And that has to do with humane treatment, meeting the needs of folks, assessing people, and working on a plan for reentry with our employees leading the way. And we talked a little earlier about recruiting and retaining employees who espouse our values. All right, going through our budget, as you can see, our revenues, we put in DOC, commissary, bail fees, etc. And that's about $30,800,000. You can see our expenditures for personnel, about almost 19 million, excuse me, almost 19 million, including state supplemental pay. We'll go through our resident related expenses for whether it's for equipment, clothing, food, transportation, that's around 2 million. We want to be able to, though, really pinpoint that down when our new CFO comes on, to being able to give that number to the council as they requested, which is cost per day per resident. So that we'll be able to keep track of that number as it goes up or down. You can see our other operational spending, whether it's liability, materials, the court monitor, vehicles, travel, etc. That's about 4,600,000. And then we put in a special category about Mardi Gras. We've received about 800,000 from the city, and I believe it's around $1 million is we've come $1.1 million or so we contracted for. We're working through that with the CAO's office as to what's still outstanding. And then at the bottom, you can see what we had to spend to make sure our deputies were out on the street in a safe manner and able to serve our community. And that's about that was about 1.7 million. Director of Human Resources, Shandon Davis, could not be here today, but he is just doing a phenomenal job in helping us to move people through the system. We are at over 700 now. And the next slide, we'll talk about the number of people in that are in our organization, but we're almost net 100 this year. And that was our goal for the entire year. So he's doing an amazing job. And this particular slide shows where we're at right now. So as you can see, we have around 229 people going through some type of hiring process right now. Not all will make it through. Not all will pass the background check. Not all will be able to join our organization. Excuse me, our organization. But as you can see on the gray line below, these are people who we are trying to get into the jail, which is, obviously our biggest function, but not everybody will join, but you can see we are moving people through the process. He is just doing a phenomenal job.
What percentage are you hopeful of? As you take a look at the applications, as you guys go through screening, what percentage are you of the 229 do you think you'll get? Or do you want to get? Did you expect to get?
Well, that's a little hard to kind of estimate, just depending on what we're getting in. So if you're looking at we are recruiting for deputies, that might be less 50% or less. Because you have people coming in with no prior experience, younger, so on and so forth. When at the bottom, you see our leadership, our hiring leadership, that's a little bit higher percentage when you're looking at detectives for ISB, because we're taking those from outside as well. They're going to have prior experience in those professions. So we would think that would be a little higher, but I couldn't really put a percentage on it. But usually what I'm seeing over the last, because we had a number of cycles of recruiting classes, it's 50% or less, I would say, given the newbies coming into the organization.
And what's the biggest obstacle?
Backgrounds. Some backgrounds are a big issue. And then also the job, it's a tough job. When they see what the job is really about, it's pretty tough for them.
So they apply, and once you explain to them what their job duties are, they turn it down.
Some of them don't make it all the way through the recruitment process.
Okay, any particular thing in background that stands out more than any other?
I'm trying to just think from what I've seen, just issues that have come before us. Usually it's people may have either some extensive criminal issues or could be prior job issues. So it's a number of things. Nothing big jumps out. There's a number of issues though, nothing prominent.
And I just thought I asked because we're experiencing that in other categories. And I think it would be helpful to know what is that issue that stops the person who applies for a job? Because if you apply for something, you would assume that that's what you want to be.
Yeah.
And is there some consistency in, people not making it through the process, especially for different levels of law enforcement or municipal jobs? Because I think it'd be helpful if we knew that to kind of hone into what that issue is, and maybe we can work with it or around it, or help the applicants kind of deal with it in doing advertising and education for those jobs.
Yeah, deputy is the biggest issue.
Okay, all right.
Coming and working in OJC is the biggest issue. That's
all right. Thank you.
Thanks. And as you can see below that, we have our leadership hiring initiatives. We are in a transition period right now as we are getting our executive team up to speed. On board and then up to speed. But we are moving forward with a number of really important positions. One of the most being our Deputy Chief of Jail Operations, Deborah Hammonds. She was selected and is on board and has been on board for about a month. Having this additional high-level supervisor on board to do the day-to-day running of the jail has allowed Dr. Bergden to now start really concentrating on programming, reentry, reconciliation, restoration, our objectives for our residents. So that's a big hire for us. The manager of IT, information technology, he crash landed right into the middle of us trying to change all of our systems and utilize the ARPA funds, et cetera. So he's come on board and is doing a great job. He's only been on board about a month. We're moving forward with a director of compliance, which is huge for us to make sure that we are meeting our goals of complying with this consent judgment. Chief financial officer, all these are really key hires for me to be able to have data and a snapshot of where we are as an organization. Chief legal officer, again, leading all of our efforts with consent judgment, civil court, litigation, liability, all those. And then a director of operations to make sure that we're all really working together cohesively and as a unit. We still are in the process for community engagement and investigative services manager, as well as our policy manager. Our assistant chief for jail operations was our policy manager. So we have to find somebody to replace her. So all very key hires for us. As you can see on the next slide, we look at separations. We're at 702 total employees. In the criminal side, which includes the jail and the courts, you're looking at 641. And then on our civil side, 61. We put the reasons there for separation. Personal reasons is a big part of it, again, and that has to do with the challenging nature of the work in the jail. You can see some of the other ones just a little less significant, and then you can see misconduct for performance or or termination for performance or misconduct being another significant category. The council had asked us about our staffing plan. It took a while to get to the point that we're at right now, but we had some experts help us with that. They went through the department from top to bottom, meeting with all of our managers, looking at every single position, looking at where we needed to be, and making sure that we calculate in what's the name of the what's that? Schifferly, yeah. The relief factor. When you're running 24/7 as the jails do, when you run for 24/7, you have to have a relief factor built in for people being out for injury, sickness, so on and so forth. And so that once these experts had come in and done their job and put that together for us, they estimated that we still need another 282 positions to be filled. We had only estimated 240, but with that relief factor of people not showing up, people getting hurt, COVID sick, et cetera, that went up to about 282. The next slide talks about our request for proposals. A lot of it having to do with our making our jail and our organization a smart organization. We need the jail to be smart. That data is used by everybody, council, DA, courts. It's the hub that starts it all. We're looking forward to getting that moving. I've talked to our new IT director, Christopher Dickinson, about prioritizing that, trying to move that forward. Case management system, you might not think that's a big thing, but that's huge when it comes to issues like deaths in the jail and the investigations that follow that. Those have to be handled in a consistent manner with supervisory review, kickback, et cetera. That's a very key system for us. And for anybody to be able to, our compliance unit to be able to provide oversight. The grievance system, commissary system, tablet system, I have prioritized that because that has to do with behavior in the jail, and that has to do with violence in the jail, misconduct, so on and so forth. So that's a very big issue for us. It can allow our residents to be able to meet with their families, which we know brings down the amount of violence and amount of bad behavior in the jail. So we're working on that. It allows for programming, which is helpful when you're there. We have some people who've been there since 2000 and I believe 14, 13. So they've been there for a number of years with basically nothing to do. So this is going to be huge for us, for Dr. Bergman to be able to deliver our programming going forward. And so we are in the vendor review process on all of those, and we have invited the CAOs, ARPA funds folks to be a part of that. In fact, I think we have somebody in our offices 2 or 3 days a week looking at all the technology. Okay, the next slide is about jail population. I'm gonna turn that over to Dr. Bergman.
Okay, so at the moment, we've got over 1,100 residents in the jail. And most notably, the return to jail is around 82%. And so that's telling us we really need to be putting resources into re-entry support, because that's a high percentage of people that are being charged and returning.
One of the highest in the country.
Yes, yeah. So we're currently working on how we can support people being released back out into the community. Either we're finding agencies who already have grant money to support programs, or we're looking for grant money ourselves to create programs.
I have a question.
Also notable is that nearly 50% of the residents are under the mental health caseload, and 2/3 of them have come in on violent charges. So that just gives you a snapshot of the kind of population we're working with. And we're trying to transfer residents to Department of Corrections as soon as we can in terms of limiting the numbers in the jail.
I would just note on that, when I got into office last year, the average number of times that somebody had been booked was about 8. And now we're over 9 at this point, in a little over a year.
Well, Mr. Chair, may I ask it now?
Yeah, Councilmember.
You know, I was going to wait until the end to ask this, but since it came up now, so what are we doing about that? As a city, as all these organizations that are involved with rehab and other issues, and I don't want to point them out right now, but the numbers speak for themselves. Of the persons that you have in there now, 900 of them were there before, and they were on an average more than 8 or 9 times. I don't expect you to have the answer, but I'm gonna tell you, maybe there is an answer that you know of that something can be done, because to the community at large, that's a very disturbing statistic.
Yeah.
And especially since it's 2/3. So you can assume that of the not, right, 2/3 violence. So you can assume of the 918 people who returned, 2/3 of those committed a violent crime and returned.
That's right.
That's disturbing. So I'm gonna ask you, because it's always been talked about, what is being done in the facility itself to help people before they get out so that they don't return?
Well, everything for us starts with staffing, because you have to have deputies there for any programs that go forward. But Dr. Bergden, and she can talk about her, our plans for meeting their needs, whatever those may be. But that's why she was hired as a clinical psychologist to deal with the population. Not everything is about them getting a job. Sometimes it's, a lot of times it has to do with substance abuse or mental health, trauma, a number of issues. So we are working on, and we've gotten some money, and we're gonna, as Dr. Bergden said, working with the city on their reentry money as well. Reentry from the jail can be tricky, but I'm gonna turn that over to Dr. Bergden to talk about what we are trying to establish.
So one thing we need desperately is a case management system, because you need tram tracks to run programs along and to be able to relate to their reentry organisations out in the community. So we expanded our case managers from 3 to 8 to start setting that up. So we started writing up case management guidelines, but we need a computer system for tracking it. So what those case managers will do will assess people's re-entry needs the minute they hit the front door, so we can start planning. Even though we can't predict, will they go off to Department of Corrections upon sentencing, or will they be sentenced to the community or found innocent and freed to the community? So we can't predict that. So we're going to be assessing everyone's needs as they come through the door to find out what needs need to be addressed in order to be targeting the programs correctly. So I see it divided between offence-related needs like drug and alcohol use, conflict resolution, anger management. Some of the men have asked for family violence programs. And then there's the vocational needs. And what can we do pre-vocational needs? Who can we predict would want to employ our residents as they come out? And we work backwards into the jail to see how we can prepare them for those kind of jobs. And then the other issue we've got is we get very short notice of release. So we've got to, and we release 24/7, 24 hours over 7 days. So we need to set up a system that we have case managers at the exit who can straight away tap people into the right services as soon as they leave. One of the things we've got that's—
Can you comment on that? Why do you get short notice of relief? Or you talk of release, you talk about like they're gonna be let out within 24 hours?
Well, they go to court, the court releases them, they come back to the jail, and then we need to release them on that order. And it could be at any time.
Yeah,
So,
a bond or a bail could be set at any time.
yeah, so it
Or
could be 11
paid.
o'clock at night. So we're trying to work out, is there somebody, somewhere a person can go to have at least 1 or 2 nights accommodation upon release until they sort themselves out. Otherwise, they're exiting the jail without that support in the evenings.
And we're working with the formerly incarcerated
Yeah.
transitions.
Clinic, yeah.
We talked about addiction here and about opioid use disorder. That's a big part of reentry and making sure that people, when they leave out of here, don't add to those statistics that you mentioned earlier. Just understanding about.
So this year we're switching to medically assisted treatment. Previously, you would only receive opioid substitution therapy if you already prescribed it when you came into the jail, which doesn't make sense. So if you were opioid substance user and you came to the jail without the prescription, you couldn't be prescribed the medication. Now we're starting that prescription within the jail. So at least people leaving with opioid substitution therapy in a plan. And then we've been working with the formerly incarcerated treatment clinic in terms of setting up those processes for when they come out.
So a lot of it is opioid addictions or drug addictions. And why does somebody come back to you 8 or 9 times? What is a person saying the 9th time that they came back? Because they didn't have any money, because there wasn't the old catch-all of affordable housing, or they felt that they were depressed, or what are we talking about that brings somebody back 8 times?
So we would have to do a survey, there'll need to be a research project around that. In terms of finding out what the patterns of return to custody are. I'm not aware if anyone's done that in Louisiana, but I could search for it.
Is anyone getting mental health assistance?
Yeah, that's
In what
part of our
form?
consent judgment. Yeah,
You know,
the
what
WellPath
form?
are the providers for that, which, and they've contracted with
And
Tulane
actually,
Psychiatry.
sometimes the way I ask a question, I'm asking it for the public's sake, because the public is under the impression that half of the persons who are housed at the, the Justice Center have mental challenges that aren't getting met.
It's tough to meet those needs in a jail, but we do have providers through WellPath. Tulane Psychiatry is assisting us with that. But one of the things that's most important to note is whether it's programming, whether it's therapy, whether it's medical appointments, meeting your lawyer, whatever, you have to have deputies to be there to transport them and to keep the situation safe. And so that's a struggle for us, making sure when we're down 200 and in the jail, that's probably close to 200, that number of vacancies that we need to meet. We have to transport them. This is a very sick population. And so that's, there's a lot of outside medical help that they receive as well. So deputies are the key to us, all of our programming, all of our services there.
Can you give me an example of a program that is successful relative to recidivism?
In terms of,
Percentage. I hear so many organizations say that the percentage of people who are recidivists is so low. But you give me an example of the fact that 918 are repeat detainees of 1,100. So that's 80-something%. At the end of the day, something is not matching up in terms of reducing recidivism.
Well, there's no one program that's going to fit all. Some people need economic assistance, educational assistance, but as we talked about, a huge portion need mental health, and that's a big issue. And addiction is another. And those are lifelong battles. Those are lifelong treatments that are needed there. So, but Travis Hill has been a success for us. It's really good. The young folks love that. They have a pod that we keep them on. Most of them are on. They like that because they all go to school together. We see, believe the behavior is a lot better there because they have something to do most days. So it's that's a big win for us. But just programming in general, keeping people occupied and moving them toward some type of goal for themselves.
It's really about getting enough deputies to give them some of the individual attention they need.
That's right.
Okay. All right, what can we do as a city council to help? On the mental health caseload, we've approved so many dollars, if you will. I got to be careful with my expression. We've approved monies for mental health assistance, whether it be in schools, whether it be at the United Medical Centers and the like. What can we do in this regard?
I think the council is doing a great job on that. And it's the initiative with the schools is going to be a big help to keep people out of the juvenile facility and our facility. The council has, we have that strategic intercept map, which has been around for a while. I believe the Big MacArthur Center helped to kind of put that together. We would look at ways to keep people out of the system. So you've put together the alternative mental health responders. That's huge, making sure that they're able to meet the needs of people instead of them ending up in the jail. You looked at LEAD, trying to deal again with addictions and treatment for those opioid use disorder. I think Instead's getting ready to work, and I think that's going to help us get some people out of the jail and get them to some treatment. But this is a huge population that we're dealing with. And as you know, on the streets, that population is even larger. All you have to do is look at Claiborne or Tchoupitoulas or the West Bank Expressway, and you can, or Broad Street, and you can see it's there front and center. It's a huge issue, and dealing with mental health, dealing with substance abuse is a lifelong treatment. And so that is, it's a big issue that we, as the council is doing, we need to get everybody involved in.
What would be your comment relative to where you think most people who are released go? Do they go to a home? Do they go to a property that is affordable, or do they go to the streets?
Oh, good question. I don't know if are we able to answer that
I
yet?
know, because I sit on about 3 interagency policy groups, and I know the biggest need is accommodation. So we all agree that the biggest need is accommodation,
So where do they go?
but we
If there
don't
are
know
no
where they
accommodations.
go. Yeah,
I encourage us to follow that because I am not feeling that it's a affordable housing alone in that regard. I mean,
That's right.
you know, there's a group that is on houses, everything, you know, that's the real reason that we have all these issues. But at the end of the day, I think that we have people who are going immediately back to the streets. And because there's so easy availability of, unfortunately, substances that we talked about, which is what the coroner will mention just in terms of his numbers alone. I don't know if I have an answer to this, even if I'm raising the question right, but I do want us to try to track more where those who are released are going.
We agree with you, and that's what the technology is so important for us, but also the case management system. We're trying to assess them as soon as they come in so we know what their needs are and what is the most base need, I guess you would say. What's the most important need? It could be mental health. Not everybody's ready to go to school or get a job or do those things. It could be housing. It could be trauma treatment. It could be a number of things. So we're trying to see what is the most important issue for them, a barrier for them to you know, live the American dream and get them to a community provider who can help with that when they're released.
What do you see in terms of the setup or start date for, based on the fact that you're right now in review of RFPs, what time frame are we looking at? Case management, for example.
Good question.
we think by the end of the year, we will have chosen someone, and that would be part of, because the case management system in that slide is more about the detective work. So it would be in the jail management system.
Very frustrating to the public. I know it's incredibly frustrating. So for example, for the next 5 months or 4.5 months, we'll continue to not know where people are going. I understand. Look, I'm not trying to get on you. It's just a little frustrating. I've been spending a lot of time involved with those who are unhoused and some of the situations that I see. And I think that some people are trying to make the solution so simplistic, you know, and for whatever reasons it might be. And it's very complex.
That's right.
Why. And at the end of the day, even if you had housing for them, sometimes you'll still have returns. Because I know some people go home with relatives. I know of situations where people pick up people who have been released but they can't stay in their house with them, but they can come there. I'll bring you, and you can stay even in the yard, but you can't come in the house. You can stay in the garage and things like that. I hope that this case management system allows us to track it even down to that level where we know where people are going and you know what's going on. That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Jeruso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning or afternoon at this point. I thought Councilmember Green may ask this since he's been raising it repeatedly. All the assessments have gone up so much. The council with the mayor has said, we're not going to roll our millages forward. I was just wondering, the sheriff's office has made a decision about that.
We have not yet. I think I have like another week or so to just kind of go through it with our entire team. We have not made a decision yet.
Okay, and again, plan is we'll announce that publicly, what you're going to do next week.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
I see Councilmember Morrell, but we'll wait for him to come back. Sheriff.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move through. You can see average length of stay for folks based on race right there or age. But we do have some folks who've been there years, and we do look forward to working in some of these criminal justice coordinated groups to try and I know Dr. Astor's been with the jail reduction task force, really trying to pinpoint those who are not here for violence or gun crimes to try and see what we can do to get those out. So those are drug and usually property crimes, trying to get those out of jail.
What does the category mean? And the average length of stay: Asian 337, Black 283.41, Hispanic 181, White 158. What are those numbers?
Those are the average length of stay that they are with us before they are released.
Okay, so Asians are there on average longer than African American.
More serious crimes, but that's a very small percentage. Very small percentage.
Yeah. Okay.
The number of days.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Usually waiting to be transferred, right? To stay.
Or it could be more serious charges, so they're there for a while until either it gets reduced or somebody can meet their bail, but usually more serious charges.
Okay. All right. Thank
some of the folks and organizations and groups who are providing services in the jail. And as Dr. Bergden ramps up her programming, there'll be more coming. But One Book, One New Orleans, we've had a number of prominent authors come in and just talk to our residents and try and give them some a little bit of hope with the types of books that they're bringing in. We also know that people who journal or do some type of introspection and put it down on paper, that are residents, it usually helps them to do better in jail and when they leave. Sister Miriam Alohu is just a superstar. She's teaching decarceration and she's helping us with our day reporting center. And she is going to come help us as well, just in general with supporting our reentry efforts. She's, like I said, a rock star, doing a great job. We have faith-based and chaplains programs, and that is whatever faith you may be. The Black and Blue Project, which was a tribute, started as a tribute to the first African-American woman deputy chief at NOPD, Chief Yvonne Bechet, and it's now morphed into kind of a community dialogue between Black police officers or Black law enforcement and the Black community. And they're going to be helping our Travis Hill students to do some writing. All these comics are written by teenagers in our community. Operation Restoration, which is a phenomenal program that's been doing a great job for years, and they're helping us with the high set for women, making sure we have more programming for our women. And then the Day Reporting Center is working on that therapeutic urban garden for participants as well. Just some highlights. As you can see what's coming up next, we've opened up, I think we began last week on Monday, more magistrate and commissioners pretrial court appearances. We have returned to in person on that. So we're taking more people over more times per day. A big shout out to our transportation unit for making sure that happens, as well as OJC and our courts as well. That was a collaboration of working with our chief of staff, Chief Judge Pittman, the magistrate as well over at Criminal District Court to make sure that happened. And it's been very successful. It's also very necessary to make sure that people are getting bonds set quickly and either released or, moved upstairs to be housed. We talked about recruiting classes. We've had a number of them and 124 recruits that have come in. Like I said, we're about almost net 100 deputies. So that's really good for us in the jail. We talked about crime victims reparations, which we work with a number of you, Councilmember Green, we've been with you, Councilmember Harris as well at different crime victims events. That's some of the most tough work and challenging work that we do, but also some of the most rewarding. We're not leaning to our own understanding. The National Institute of Corrections has been around since the 70s. They provide technical leadership, input, assistance, and we are asking them for all of it. And we look forward to getting them here. We have to do one more site visit before we can get them here to do some strategic inmate management training for us and our supervisors. That is a really big key about dealing with violence and other issues in the jail. We have a new website, which you go take a look at. It's a little clean. It's a little clean and mean as we are working on data dashboards and other information for the next iteration of that website. But we're looking forward to having more information up there and just a better interface. Community engagement, our new director, when that person comes on board, we'll have to get ready for Thanksgiving as well. We're going to return it to Thanksgiving Day. I think we did it on Monday or Tuesday of that week last year, but we're going to return to that Thanksgiving Day. And then sometime in the spring, we will be launching our first Citizens Academy, and the DEA asked to partner with us on that. So we'll be working with them. Other than that, we continue to recruit, to build, to grow, and work on our culture.
Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you. I've got a series of questions that are a little off topic. I've been contacted by a former employee from your office regarding an incident. And I'm really trying to wrap my head around how things could go this badly. I'm sure you're aware of the choking incident in 2A, Pod 2A.
Is this case manager talking about? Yeah. We are.
To say that, in speaking with this young woman, her experience was not ideal would be an understatement. I have read your presentation. I see how much you care about the residents and their well-being. To have a woman who was choked be told she can't seek medical attention until she types up the report. To have a woman in your employ who was choked feel like the leadership involved was more concerned with managing the incident than making sure she was okay. It's very, very bothersome to me.
Yeah, and to be clear, the care of our employees in that jail is job number one. If they're not safe, the residents aren't going to be safe either. We're still looking at what happened in this particular incident. I don't have the investigative report on that, but let me tell you what we have done. We have made sure we have a police psychologist on board to treat people who have been in traumatic injuries, and most employees go to that. We had an issue that occurred this weekend. We are sending in somebody to talk to other deputies and employees on the pod. It was traumatic. This is tough and challenging work. I care about each and every one of my employees. But to say that,
was that in place?
I still don't know what happened all on this issue.
Well, I have the timeline. Was that in place when this incident occurred?
I'm sorry?
Was that individual who's trained in responding to trauma, was that person in your employ when this incident occurred on, let's see, I'll tell you the date. It was on, let me go back, July 3rd.
The police psychologist is engaged at all times.
Okay.
The person that's coming in to do the pod work is coming on board now, is new.
So there was no process internally when this incident occurred to refer that person there.
There's always a process internally. That doesn't mean that our employees didn't handle this in a proper manner when we're going to look at what went down, but there is a process in place for dealing with folks. This is a very challenging environment. I've just showed you the numbers on the number of people who are in there because of violence. And that is what our team understaffed deals with every day. And their care and my concerns for them is always at the top, always at the top. That doesn't mean we're always going to get it right, council member.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate you admitting that you didn't get it right, but what
I didn't admit to that. I didn't say we are. I haven't seen the report yet.
Okay. Well, here's my challenge. One, you have an individual who had a traumatic incident, who was choked, who was told not to leave the premises until the choked individual had to sit at her workstation and type a statement, and was told by a sergeant, you cannot leave till you type a statement. Two, when that person drove themselves to an ER, that person, because I don't know what was going on and who was in charge of managing this, they were not told who to go see. They were told that you should go to the hospital, and that person who was your employee, who was not yet eligible workers' comp, paid $350 out of pocket at an ER to get seen for an incident. Looking at this timeline on her repeated attempt to try and get information on how to obtain workers' comp, to see what could be available to help with their trauma, it looks like she was failed at every single instance. So the point is, I know you have a challenge hiring people who want to work in that environment, but if this is the experience of people who do and they leave and they go back into the community and they explain what their experience was in that environment, it's going to make it even harder for you to have people that want to come work for you.
If you can show me one organization, including the city of New Orleans, that is perfect on every issue, I'll go ahead and take that.
Well,
but let me tell you something. I want you to take a look at our separations. We have people commit misconduct. We have to investigate it and handle it accordingly. If this was not handled right, there will be accountability for it.
The incident happened on July 3rd. It is August 8th, and you don't have a handle yet on this incident. Like, you haven't done a review, and there's no repercussions for how it was handled.
What's the average amount of time for an investigation in the city of New Orleans?
Well, typically our employees, typically our employees aren't choked on the job, so we don't really have to deal with whether someone is choked on the job. And as you said, based upon
you don't run a jail with violent people in it. So
I don't run a jail. I don't run a jail. But what I do is I'm in charge with this council of giving you money to hire people. And if I'm not convinced that people are being treated well and that this policy, I appreciate that you say now that you have a policy in place. What I want to hear from
We
you,
always had a policy in place.
well,
People
obviously,
just didn't handle their business if true, and we will see when that investigation occurs.
when will
It's
our
finished.
investigation be complete?
Well, the same bureau that we're hiring for right now, those are some of those 282 vacancies, is also responsible for investigating all of the violence that goes on in the jail as well. So they're a little bit stretched, but it'll be soon.
So you're hiring the people who do the investigations currently?
We are hiring more. We have a core group. We are hiring more because that is a consent decree function, and it is an important function as well.
It's oftentimes very concerning when I find myself agreeing with Councilman Green on stuff. This might be one of them, but
I guess that's good.
we're all ringing the bell. Yeah, the city of New Orleans has lots of jobs available, as well as the sheriff's office. But when I talk to people, young people in our community who have such a horrific experience, and the fact that we are a month out and it hasn't seemingly been addressed in any shape or form. Honestly, it would have been nice because obviously there was a failure when someone who is not a uniformed deputy is in a pod and they're assaulted, to at least have someone reach out, check on their well-being, and also maybe apologize for dropping the ball, which has not occurred.
I'm not sure who has or has not reached out in there. You were getting one side of it. When we get the rest of it, we'll be glad to report back.
Okay, we'll be sure at the next budget hearing to see how you report back, and maybe I'll report for you too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Councilmember Green.
Can you comment on what happens when an employee is assaulted? Are you comfortable with the response that you get from the parties that should investigate, or just tell me what happens? Because I think that, you know, you hear rumors that employees get assaulted, but not rumors, because you've actually shown that 14 employees were assaulted so far this year. What happens in that case?
Yeah, an investigation is conducted. We have to deal with the person who's alleged to have done it, the resident. They have to be housed in a certain way, moved to certain place so that they can be watched, and also there's a disciplinary pod for infractions of jail rules. So there's a number of moving parts to that. And our Investigative Services Bureau conducts investigations to see, you know, what happened, what could we have done better, so on and so forth. So, and then it's up to also our jail management team to, you know, suppose it's an issue of, we had an issue with handcuffing or somebody not being handcuffed appropriately, and that caused an injury, that caused a fight or an injury or something of that nature. Then we'll come to roll call, do trainings about handcuffing, coming back and making sure that we're giving our team the appropriate training to keep them safe.
At what time does the district attorney get involved, if at all?
If we rebook the resident on a criminal charge, we draft up a report, it's approved by supervisors, and it goes to the, is filed and goes through the prosecution.
During the time that you've been here, has the DA prosecuted anyone for an assault on a deputy?
I don't have, I'm sure they have, but I don't have statistics on that at this time.
You're comfortable with the responses that you've gotten?
From the district attorney? Yeah. It's our job to make sure we put together the evidence and give it to them.
Right.
In a way they can use it. Yeah.
I just want to dispel any rumors that people who work, because it helps with employee morale and also recruiting, that people who have gotten into an altercation with or been assaulted by someone who isn't a resident, if you will, or someone who is housed there, is still subject to punishment and prosecution. It's not just let go for no reason.
Yeah, no, we absolutely do investigate those and file charges where appropriate.
You have 282 job vacancies, and I'm so sorry that throughout this city, we still continue to have so many job vacancies when there are people out there who could potentially fill them for one reason or the other. They aren't, including people who've had some sort of events or trauma in their lives, who, if they could get it back together, could take some of those jobs. Can you talk to the public about why someone should join your shop?
this is a chance to make a difference in your community. We are trying to do something different here. We're trying to deal with the root causes of crime. We're trying to deal with as Dr. Bergden always says, it's trauma, it's mental health, it's addiction. That's what's in our jail. And so this is a chance to help your community. The people in our jail are people that, and they're our neighbors. We have a chance to do something better. And when we do that, we help ourselves as well. We make ourselves safer. When they're safer, we make ourselves safer. We bring down, there are less victims of crime, less fear in the community. We just have a better quality of life overall when we do that.
Are you
So
comfortable?
people can come be a part of that.
Are you comfortable that the city council has done all that it can to help you?
We still have some needs, but we're working on those. And I think that technology and of course, a pay plan are two big parts of that. But the raise that we got last year was a huge boost for us. And these funds that we're going to use to have a new jail management system and make it a more smart jail are going to be really key for us in terms of data too.
Right. I appreciate the fact that you, the district attorney, and our New Orleans Police Department especially are using the technology you presented today, and I could say other departments too. We have others that are coming up, are using the technology that's available to become a force multiplier, because at some instance, we're going to get to the point where we recognize that we're not going to fill all these vacancies. So technology is so important. So I'm glad that you're